Reborn. Evolving from Nothing. Chapters 181 to 190. Chapter 181 Castle. White Demon Worm Bloodline Acquired. Dorian smiled as he heard the notification from Asra, moving away from the broken corpse. Around him, several other dead white demon worms could be seen. However, they weren't in the same cratered area from before. Instead, they were several kilometers closer to the castle, only a stone's throw away. They had made fast progress as they moved across Moria. On the way, they were ambushed twice more, by the same white demon worm hordes. Each group of them was deadly and powerful, but completely unable to get past Dorian's elite army. The demonic remnants didn't seem to have much purpose beyond attacking outsiders and defending the blighted world. Despite the fact that Dorian and his army made quick work of them, more kept on coming out to attack. And as Dorian looked out at the stone castle before them, he could sense an ominous aura fluctuating off of it. Something was inside this castle, trying to absorb their bloodlines? It doesn't work, I've tried as well. You need a complete or mostly complete corpse if there isn't any blood. Dorian heard Mello's voice whisper softly in his ears, covered by a veneer of energy so that no outside sound escaped. He turned to look at the other anomaly out of the corner of his eye. Right, he doesn't have Asra. He can't have bloodlines reconstructed. The fact that Dorian had the soul spell matrix genie Asra with him was a huge advantage. Mello, so far, had been mostly quiet. He, like Dorian, held back and let the other fighters here take on the demonic remnants, conserving his energy. "What's up, you sense it too?" he responded, covering his words in the same layer of energy to hide them. At the same time, he motioned over towards the castle. There were dozens of powerful experts all around them. If they didn't hide what they said, there was a 100% chance they'd be overheard. The shades all around were scanning the environment, waiting to see if another attack was incoming. Several of them were spread out, trying to draw in any remnants. They all seemed to be having a great time, talking cheerfully amongst themselves. They were disciplined and controlled in their movements, but also very relaxed. Even Captain Fabian seemed to be taking it easy, conversing with the two other captains as he looked around. The attacks so far had been more than manageable. "Yes," Mello responded smoothly, turning to look at the nearby castle. The same foreboding aura that Dorian had sensed continued to waft from it. "And I think we're the only ones that sense it. At the least, none of them do." Mello waved his hand at the other shades, including his own team of elite pseudo-king experts. They seemed to have merged well with the other shades, one and all fans of Dorian's alter ego, Lord Inigo. That character was truly a useful cover. Indeed, none of the shades, though, seemed to be acting like they felt the dangerous air that surrounded the castle. A few of them had even brought out some mugs of beer, celebrating the victories so far. "Do you think it's 15? It doesn't feel quite like him." Dorian stood up and rubbed his chin. Each anomaly gave off a unique feeling. The aura he sensed wasn't that of an anomaly, but it felt oddly familiar for some reason. Mello shook his head. "I can't tell. I just know that I recognize it, at a base level. It must have something to do with us." Before Mello could continue, Captain Fabian walked over, followed by the two other captains. "Holy High Lord," Fabian began, nodding his head respectfully. "We have successfully rebuffed the threat and can find no other threats in the area, apart from the castle. The scouts have said there are some type of shambling demonic remnants walking within the exterior of the castle and patrolling the walls." The captain's voice was calm as he spoke, reporting to Dorian. "Very good." Dorian made the effort to look authoritative and powerful, relying upon his law of valor. Mello, meanwhile, held back and let Dorian do the talking. "Then let us attack immediately. The sooner he could heal Helena up and escape, the better." "Yes, sir." Fabian spun around, raising a long metal spear into the air. "Warriors, gather." His voice echoed as a powerful king-class aura boomed out. Immediately, every shade turned to look over at him, all swarming forward. Powerful auras clashed as they gathered. Energy in the air fluctuated, almost as if this world wasn't virtually dead due to the presence of so many Lord-class or higher experts. "Hendar, raise your ice bridges." Fabian gestured at one of the shades. This shade was wearing a light blue robe covered in ornate silk patterns. He looked to be middle-aged, with a square gray beard. "Yes, sir, Captain." This particular shade was one of the few wizards that had joined Dorian's Moria Liberation Force. The wizard clasped his hands together as he turned to look at the castle, a gaze of concentration appearing on his face. Ice magic. Heavy trailing spears. Bright blue energy glowed around the man, swarming out from him. Dorian could distinctly notice, however, that the air didn't seem to be affected much. When using abilities or casting a spell, the air usually fluctuated slightly with energy. The clashing auras of the various shades here was a good example, though also an exception it seemed. It seemed the dead air didn't resonate well with magic. The reason the air had fluctuated with the various auras earlier probably had to do with the sheer scale of having so many Lord-class experts gathered. Dorian could feel the power of the spell noticeably weaken, by around 30% to 40%. Still, the wizard was a Lord-class expert, able to use the energy from his soul. Lesser wizards below Lord class probably would have their spells reduced by 90% or even more. Whoosh! Spears of frozen energy shot through the air, leaving behind a long cold trail of connected ice that soared all the way to the high walls of the castle. The trail was about half a meter wide and the same thick, faint particles of ice drifting off from it. The ice wizard launched a dozen such spears, each one slamming into one part or another of the castle wall. Each spear didn't seem to damage the wall, but instead spread out a large clump of ice, securing down. Everyone split into your teams and clear the walls. Wipe out any demonic remnants you find and stay on guard. Captain Fabian waved his hands at everyone, motioning for the shades to advance. Woo! Charge! To battle! The shades all climbed up on the ice trails and began to run forward. Their eagerness to fight off the demons was palpable. According to Fabian, legends had arisen of a hero that would wipe away the demons that plagued Moria. The demonic remnants hadn't always existed here, but appeared mysteriously over time, with new ones gradually appearing to replace ones that were killed. Many shades had tried before, with powerful armies or mighty wizards, to wipe all of them out for good. All had failed. Anyone that lived near Moria had heard of this legend. Many powerful shade warriors wanted to take part in it. When Lord Inigo rose to fame, many saw that as a sign that he was the destined hero here to cleanse Moria. To the shades, it all made sense. This was a legend that had existed for centuries. It was about time it was fulfilled. Dorian moved forward in one giant leap, ahead of one of the groups, splitting off from the captains and Mello. As Lord Inigo, so far he had held back and let the shades take out the demonic remnants. Now, however, he felt it best to contribute. A heroic shade like him would lead his warriors into battle. Touching light, he activated the ability. Immediately energy fled from his soul as a blade of pure, concentrated light appeared in his hand. He frowned slightly as he spawned it. Even he was affected by the world around him. His ability didn't weaken, but it cost him nearly twice as much energy to summon the sword. Follow me to victory. Dorian's voice boomed out with power, like a glorious leader full of might. His force of presence was incredible, especially given the opinion the shades had of him. Rawr! Mighty Lord Inigo! To victory! Dorian led a charge of shades up the icy trail, his movements sure. As he ran, however, he was incredibly focused. Why is it so slippery? Running up the long spear of ice was like trying to balance on a twisting log while running up, all atop a rushing river. Dorian mentally cursed as he put his every iota of willpower on not falling. All the other shades seemed fine. To those with years and years of combat experience and training, something like this wasn't much. Relax, Dorian. Calm down. If you're frantic, your passive abilities can't help. Dorian forcefully calmed himself down. As he did so, he could mentally feel the exuberant grace ability kick in, helping him right his balance and run much smoother. At the least, he didn't have to flail his arms to not fall off. In just a few short moments after, Dorian and his group arrived atop the castle wall. The ramparts seemed to all be made of a similar type of gray stone, cracked with time. Immediately upon their arrival, they were attacked. Species: Blue-armed demon, desiccated. Class: Lord class, middle. Maximum energy level: 50,808. Species: Yellow-beak demon, desiccated. Class: Lord class, early. Maximum energy level: 38,221. Species: Goringer tiger demon, desiccated. Class: Lord class, early. Maximum energy level 31,992. A multitude of demonic remnants all swarmed forward. Dorian saw a large demon wearing a full set of plate armor with glowing blue arms jump at them, its obese body jiggling as it swung with a large cleaver. He saw a weird bird-faced demon swing at them with a long black scythe. He saw what looked like an armored tiger covered in spikes, a Goringer tiger demon according to Asra, leap into the air, slashing downward. A variety of demonic remnants were all up atop the wall. All of them were at the Lord class, but desiccated, meaning their strength was but a shadow of what it had been when they were alive. BOOM. SHHHHKK. Clash. The sounds of combat unfolded as the shades all rebuffed the attack demons, blasting many of them backwards. While the demonic remnants were powerful, they were still somewhat weaker than the group of elite Lord-class shade experts. Dorian leapt forward and stabbed his sword towards the chest of one of the heavily armored blue-armed demons. Grower RRRR. In the moment that he jumped, he activated his perfect body ability, vastly increasing his strength and speed. When he stabbed forward with the blade of light, he smoothly ducked under a punch the blue-armed demon threw with its free hand, pulling his blade upward till it was poised to pierce through the chest of the demon. Whoosh! The sword melted right through the armor and chest of the creature, right where its heart was, according to Asra. The demon immediately collapsed, killed instantly as he pushed forward. The sword he used was functionally as hot as the hottest dragonfire in existence. Taking a direct blow through the heart meant almost sure death. The entire exchange occurred in the space of a split second. Dorian hadn't hesitated and managed the kill in a very short amount of time. While he was no martial genius, he was getting better and better at close combat thanks to his incredibly high-level senses and constant effort. He drew upon the law of valor as much as he could, strengthening his body. The energy he could derive from it was limited, but it was enough to enhance his physique and make his blows strong, especially when combined with his perfect body ability. He found that using other laws at once wasn't possible. He could barely sense the law of valor. Trying to draw on other laws was far too difficult. Absorb. As the corpse fell, Dorian tapped on it slightly. He immediately absorbed the latent energy in its soul spell matrix, as well as a portion of it to hopefully reconstruct it later. A portion of blue-armed demon's soul spell matrix has been constructed. More samples are required for a full reconstruction. Asra's voice echoed coolly in his head. Careful, holy hero. A hasty warning echoed out as a particularly large one of the Goringer tiger demons leapt up onto the wall directly in front of Dorian. This one was a middle lord-class demon, covered in spikes and protrusions. Roar! Hia! One of the shade warriors jumped at it, kicking it solidly in the side with a boot that glowed with red energy. The tiger dug its claws into the stone wall, ripping out stones as it skidded a few meters. It managed to hold on, however, and charged at Dorian, black energy crackling around it. Dorian didn't hesitate and instead ran directly towards it, wielding his blade of light in front of him. Fate, fall in my favor. Without being able to shift forms or use many of his abilities, Dorian opted to manipulate fate instead. At the same time, he abruptly dived down in a sliding motion, his entire body blurring as he moved quickly. Whoosh! The barbed arms of the tiger crashed above his head as they just barely missed, Dorian's frantic slide hurling him underneath the Lord-class Goringer tiger demon. As he dove under it, he stabbed upward with his blade. SHHHKKKK. He flipped over to his feet and spun around in midair as he finished sliding under it, his entire body gleaming with light. He landed on the castle wall, facing the Goringer tiger demon. Or rather, the corpse of the Goringer tiger demon. Dorian's long sword slash had melted through and split the several meters large demon in half, killing it instantly. BOOM. Explosions and yells echoed in the distance as the shades engaged and began wiping out the demonic remnants. Dorian's army moved as a team, each shade covering each other. They worked cohesively, unlike the brashly charging demons. This greatly enhanced their offensive power, letting them take on the defenders and obliterate them. Dorian ran up to the corpse of the Goringer tiger demon, resting his hand on it. Absorb. Whoosh! A portion of Goringer tiger demon's soul spell matrix has been constructed. More samples are required for a full reconstruction. Asra's voice sounded off in his mind. The walls were teeming with demonic remnants, all of which were rushing towards Dorian and his army. There seemed to be a limited number of them left here, from what he could see. As Dorian scanned the environment, he could make out a large number rushing towards them, but no other demons after that. He would place it at around 250 or so demons of varying shapes and sizes, all of them at the Lord class. Most of them were moving in from the walls. There was a large courtyard and a few buildings in the interior of the castle area, as well as the main castle itself, but none of the demonic remnants appeared to be charging out of there. Still, it was a massive, chaotic horde charging at them with abandon. The shades all stood in formation, preparing themselves to receive the waves of attackers. Dorian's eyes narrowed. He flicked his wrist slightly as he pushed the corpse away, whipping his blade around. The corpse of the tiger slid off the wall walkway, falling down to the ground below with a thud. It was time to hunt demons. Meanwhile, somewhere else on Moria, another castle could be seen, one that looked identical to the castle Dorian was exploring. A large gray stone edifice with large towers and high bulwarks. The castle had a foreboding air about it. On the outside walls, demonic remnants could be seen, moving up and down them. The landscape surrounding this castle held the same veneer of life, a facade that contained only death in reality. Bright green grass, colorful trees, fields of flowers, it held a plethora of colors. A figure could be seen making his way through this pretty meadow, headed towards this castle with a bow strapped across his back. The man wore leather hides and had calm brown eyes perched above a graying beard. As he moved, a powerful king-class aura could be seen flowing about him, one that was colorful, flashing between multiple colors. A rare, prideful aura. Abruptly, this man stopped, his eyes going cold. His hand snapped up to the bow strapped on his back, pulling it over and holding it in a ready stance. Right in front of him, a figure appeared. A humanoid of some sort that had gray skin, wore gray clothes, and seemed incredibly ordinary. In fact, if the figure hadn't arrived directly in front of the man and stood out on purpose, the archer wasn't even sure he would have seen it. "Greetings, my fellow demonic practitioner." The gray figure's voice slid out, silky smooth. "You must be Leader. I've heard about you from the council." Leader's eyes flashed as he heard this, a frown appearing. "I have already told the council I will have no part in joining them. If you are here to..." "Hold, young Leader. I am not here to convince you to join the council." The gray figure cut Leader off, shaking his head. "Instead, I am here to propose an alliance of sorts. I know why you are here." The man smiled. "You wish to protect the inheritances here as well, yes?" Leader's face froze as he heard this. He slowly lowered his bow. "Who are you?" The gray figure smiled again, an insane twinkle appearing in his eyes. "You can call me 15. Blue-armed demon bloodline acquired. Yellow-beaked demon bloodline acquired. Goringer tiger demon bloodline acquired." Dorian smiled as he looked at the 3 notifications, and then out at the walls around him. The scattered remains of a deathly army of desiccated demons could be seen, decorating the bulwarks and stone pathways. Faint reverberations of energy echoed in the normally still air, giving the battlefield an ominous hum. Dorian's army had made short work of the demons. Thanks to the Shade's tight coordination and teamwork, they suffered no casualties, though a few of the frontline fighters were injured and currently resting as they recovered. Dorian made sure to go from body to body, absorbing what he could. He disguised his movements, acting as if he was checking to be sure that all of the demonic remnants were truly dead. A few of the bodies already had their soul spell matrices absorbed when he reached them. While Mello couldn't reconstruct their bloodlines, he could still absorb the latent energy from their remnant soul spell matrix. Still, I managed to acquire all the bloodlines I could hear. There were only 3 main types of demons here. Unlike actual blood, Dorian could only absorb the main bloodline from a soul spell matrix. Remnant bloodlines that might exist in the original demon's blood were nowhere to be seen. Still, the hall was a very decent one. "Holy High Lord, should we begin to move in on the castle?" Fabian's familiar voice cut through the air as he walked up to Dorian, a long spear in his hands. An eager smile could be seen on the warrior's face as he respectfully nodded at Dorian. Dorian had relied heavily on twisting fate in the past battle. As a result of that, he had made some truly extraordinary and fantastic kills, some that looked as if they should have been impossible. His maneuvers had not gone unnoticed. Every shade in the army was taking time to glance at him with adoration in their eyes, even the ones brought here by Mello. Fabian seemed to be basking in Lord Inigo's glory. He was quite an odd character. Fabian, tell me more about these castles. You told me you'd gathered intelligence about them. Dorian took a moment to glance over at the castle. The ominous feeling he got whenever he looked at the castle proper remained. He also felt an odd draw towards this castle, a desire to go inside and find something. These two feelings were very conflicting and made him suspicious. Of course, his most pressing need still existed. He needed to find treasure so he could afford the medicine he needed to heal Helena and escape. He also needed to play the part of Lord Inigo to maintain his cover. He couldn't exactly just turn around and leave now. This is one of the 7 outer castles that circles the surface of Moria. Several times one or more of these castles has been virtually destroyed, wiped from existence. They always seem to come back, however, through some strange, abstruse magic that no one understands. Fabian began to point as he spoke, looking all around. The captain had put himself in charge of information gathering before they left, talking to all the other shades to merge all the information everyone knew about Moria together. Seeing as everyone here was someone prepared to take on the glorious mission of cleansing Moria, quite a few people here knew several things about the exotic world. When everything was combined together, a very full picture of what they were dealing with could be seen. There is one other castle, the Emperor's Castle, located within the center of the circle that the 7 outer castles form. It has never been destroyed, due to the odd, distorted field that surrounds it. Legend has it that the treasure store of the Emperor lies in this castle, untouched by Shade Hand. As Dorian heard this tidbit, he felt his heart stir. A treasure store left behind by an Emperor. Surely that would be more than enough to get whatever he needed to heal and protect Helena. He nodded sharply at the idea. As you can no doubt feel, Holy High Lord, the exotic world of Moria has almost no access to the laws of the universe. Casting spells and using the power of law is still possible, but the effects are greatly weakened. Fabian continued to explain as he saw Dorian nod. In range of the Emperor's castle, however, it is impossible to access any of the laws. Magic cannot be used, even powerful artifacts are temporarily unable to be activated. It is as if energy itself is frozen there. Fabian's voice contained an edge of warning as he spoke here, alongside frustration as he continued. Only the power of one's physique matters there. And even for the strongest of shades, those that can train their physique to an extremely powerful level are very rare. Even I, as a king-class mystic martial artist, have middling physical strength at best. One and all, the vast majority of shades, and most other humanoids, depend on the power of law. Fabian sighed and held his hands out to the side as if it couldn't be helped. Laws cannot be accessed at all while in there? Dorian's eyes flashed. A place where only physique mattered, where magic and artifacts don't work. Is it some type of dead zone? Would abilities work there? As he thought it over, a thought struck him. My transformations come with some extremely powerful physiques. Even if I can't use the power of law, I should still be able to handle myself. In fact, I am very well suited for a situation like this. While the loss of his perfect body ability, and various laws, would impact his strength, it wouldn't be as dire as it would be for the shades. If it's like that, I have to give it a try. He mentally came to a conclusion. If the opportunity arose, he would take on the final castle and actually try to cleanse the demonic ruins. But first, alright, let's take on this castle. Woo, charge forward. The shades in Dorian's army cheered, their enthusiasm as strong as ever. While some of them were still recovering from injuries and all had spent energy, they all had plenty of strength to spare. Every shade here had come to Moria fully prepared, with either pills or restorative medicine, or practice at using techniques that didn't wear them out fully. Scouts, go in first. Keep a coordinated entry and sound the alarm if you encounter any enemies or traps. Fabian took command, his voice authoritative as he organized the invasion. Various shades split off into groups as they leapt down from the castle walls, approaching the inner courtyard and front entrance of the foreboding castle. Dorian's eyes flashed as he looked at it, looking deeper towards the dangerous aura he could sense. Even though the other shades couldn't sense it, they doubtless were aware that the castle itself would contain great danger. Without hesitation, Dorian quickly joined the rest of the shades, his face expressionless as he moved forward. On a planet not far from Moria, a very different scene was taking place. A large red stone plateau stood upright in the middle of a vast ocean. This plateau was worn and weathered by the coarse weather of the sea, piercing more than 100 meters into the air from the tumultuous waves below. A stiff breeze blew across this plateau, rustling through the air. On this plateau, if one looked closely, a small building could be seen, one that was carved directly from the plateau itself. This building blended into the rock, practically invisible unless one was right next to it. A few windows opened the single-story rocky building up to the outside air, allowing sunlight to waver in. Inside the building, there was a large round table with 7 seats placed equally around it. The table, the seats, and everything in here was carved from the same red stone, worn by time and the ocean breeze. At this exact moment, strange green light began to flicker in this abandoned, random building out in the middle of nowhere. Whoosh! Sparks of green light fluttered into the air. Gradually, energy began to fluctuate, the entire inside of the building starting to glow. This energy was powerful and vitriolic. If a wise onlooker was to describe it in a single word, it would inevitably be demonic. As the energy flooded into the room, however, the powerful glow found itself unable to escape the confines of the building. Despite there being several open windows, not even a hint of energy could leave the stone chambers. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A flurry of noise rang out as several figures abruptly appeared, out of nowhere. 5 separate, darkly robed and vaguely humanoid figures, each sitting in one spot or another around the carved table. All of them wore blank, white masks, hiding their identity in case prying eyes could see them. The magic that was cast around this building made it impossible for any noise or light to escape, but certain powerful types of scrying fate magic would be capable of seeing through the protective barrier surrounding the stone structure. Even the strongest fate magic spells would be limited to what was visible, however, unable to eavesdrop. 2 seats were conspicuously empty. Sigh, why is Duke Orbit not here? A robed and masked figure sitting on one side complained, a feminine voice full of irritation. Despite her annoyance, her every word drawled with a promise of seduction. When does he ever show up on time, Danielle? The oaf takes his law of sloth practice far too literally. A large, burly-looking figure proclaimed from beneath his robes, shaking his head. 15 is absent as well? He has chosen to not report in? I still don't trust our newest member. An elderly, wavering voice broke in, motioning at one of the other empty seats. It is as I reported before, and 15 is in the same lot as us. He has a demonic inheritance of his own. I already said I was fine with continuing to use fake names when he's present, for now at least. The voice of Hallow, the warrior that was currently hunting for the Wrath inheritor who just so happened to be Dorian, echoed out. He's engaged with the target I now believe to be an inheritor of Wrath. Oh, so we have found the inheritor? The last of the 5 figures, a man with a sharp voice, hidden behind a black robe and blank mask, cut in. Yes, but there's trouble. Hallow responded with a sigh, looking over at the other members of the Council of Demons. The inheritor has been found, but I no longer believe he has good intentions. Hallow began, and was then promptly interrupted. What do you mean, he doesn't have good intentions? The sultry female voice was full of sharp intelligence as she cut in. Control yourself, mistress of lust. Let the man talk. The elderly man of the group rebuked the female, his voice scathing. You dare to lecture me on control, Baron Radisho? You let your gluttony control you more often than no. Listen here, BITC. Everyone, please. Hallow's voice burst out across the room, full of anger as he broke in. This is vitally important to the success of our kind. Our plans to transform the Shade race could falter here at the midway point if we do not act quickly. An abrupt silence coated the room as all the robed figures froze, turning to look at Hallow, shocked. I have reason to believe that the inheritor of Wrath is currently heading to Moria. In fact, he may already be there now. Hallow held a hand up, cutting off replies before they could interrupt them as he continued. No, not to accept the inheritance of Wrath there. Or at least, not just that. But instead, he is traveling there to destroy the inheritances. Hallow's words boomed with force as he explained. The being I believe to be the inheritor is a shade known as Lord Inigo Montoya. He has currently gathered a sizable army, full of Lord and King class experts, and has headed to Moria with the intent of cleansing it. His militant force has attracted considerable attention and indirectly received the support of the Church of Light. Hallow's eyes flashed underneath the blank white mask he wore as he continued. With his understanding of one of the 7 great laws, he will be able to get past the defenses that would stop non-believers. He has become an inside agent, one that brought an entire holy army with him. Something like this has never happened before and was never a part of our plans. Hallow finished with one more line, his words calm. And if we don't stop him and his army, then it is my belief that Moria, and the inheritances on there, left by the demon emperor himself, will perish. For a few moments, no one talked. A moment after, pandemonium erupted. What, an entire army? Inigo Montoya? I've heard of his tale. He is the inheritor of wrath? The darling of the Church of Light? We must act immediately. We cannot risk the inheritances being destroyed, not when we still have yet to convert enough shades. The Black Elder is right. If we lose the inheritances, our plans to infiltrate and transform the Shade race will falter. We will be forced to return to the ways of old, waiting for warriors to sense one of the 7 great laws without the assistance offered by the ruins of Moria. Everyone seemed to be speaking at once, voices bouncing back and forth as the rest of the Demon Council realized the seriousness of the situation. However, Hallow butted in, his voice booming as he drew everyone's attention. 15 is on Moria, trying to stop the false inheritor. I, myself, am closing in as we speak, and will arrive on planet soon. Unfortunately, there are several King-class fighters, and a vast number of Lord-class warriors and wizards, with the false inheritor. Hallow waved at the other members of the council. We have so little time left, the options are limited. By the time we gathered and sent any number of our subordinates over, everything would already be settled. Moria wasn't a world close to the home base of any of the members of the Demon Council. I'd like to suggest that all of you use the castle lodestone you obtained when you obtained part of an inheritance to warp through chaotic space to Moria. The council must act personally to preserve our place in the future. Hallow nodded slowly as he looked at them all. I am close enough that I don't need to shatter mine. I should arrive in the vicinity of the planet tomorrow. Everyone sitting around the table exchanged glances. To shatter the castle lodestone for something like this, single-use items that are capable of instantly warping someone away are extremely rare. It's a bit of a waste to use it on this. The burly figure spoke up, his voice hesitant. Damal, if the ruins of the Emperor are destroyed, the lodestone will fall to dust anyway. It will serve no use at all then, in addition to all our years of planning and effort coming to a dead end. Hallow sharply pointed out, how certain are you that this Lord Inigo is what you say he is? Danielle, the mistress of lust, jumped in, her sultry voice tinged with a hint of worry. Hallow sighed. The false inheritor is a veritable savant, possessing a mind capable of the most delicate subterfuge. His intellect and foresight are incredible. He has played me, the church, and everyone else all like a fiddle. I am certain he is what I say he is. Hallow shook his head. If it weren't for the overwhelming strength we possess as a group, I would fear to face up against him. His actions, his skill and manipulation, if I hadn't gotten lucky and happened upon his trail by chance, it's quite possible he would have remained completely undetected. All I can say is that we absolutely must face this threat down immediately. Hallow's voice grew cold. This, Lord Inigo, is a genius whose depth of knowledge and confidence cannot be underestimated. Oh God, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is all going to end horribly. Dorian covered his face with his hands as he looked out at the ridiculous situation in front of him. It had all happened so quickly after they entered the castle, he could scarcely believe the situation he was now in. He was standing in a large bedroom, covered in silk carpets, a silken bed, fancy furniture and pillows, all coated with friendly colors. The mysterious outer castle on Moria that was filled with a foreboding aura was nowhere to be seen. 3 gorgeous, scantily clad human women could be seen in this room alongside Dorian. One girl lounging on a couch and wearing nothing but a pair of pink panties and a scarf. She had long blonde hair and bright blue eyes that looked at Dorian with deep desire. Another was resting on the silk bed, a redhead covered in freckles, wearing a dress that was so skimpy and transparent, Dorian wondered if it even qualified to be called a dress. Her voluptuous figure was visible through it, doing nothing to hide her charms. The last girl was sitting down in a plush chair near him, a brunette wearing a pretty green bra, consciously spreading her legs open. Dorian resisted the urge to blush as he saw this, mentally cursing. I have to do what to these girls to escape this magical array trap? Chapter 182 Trap. Blue-armed demon bloodline acquired. Yellow-beaked demon bloodline acquired. Goringer tiger demon bloodline acquired. Dorian smiled as he looked at the 3 notifications, and then out at the walls around him. The scattered remains of a deathly army of desiccated demons could be seen, decorating the bulwarks and stone pathways. Faint reverberations of energy echoed in the normally still air, giving the battlefield an ominous hum. Dorian's army had made short work of the demons. Thanks to the Shades' tight coordination and teamwork, they suffered no casualties, though a few of the frontline fighters were injured and currently resting as they recovered. Dorian made sure to go from body to body, absorbing what he could. He disguised his movements, acting as if he was checking to be sure that all of the demonic remnants were truly dead. A few of the bodies already had their soul spell matrices absorbed when he reached them. While Mello couldn't reconstruct their bloodlines, he could still absorb the latent energy from their remnant soul spell matrix. Still, I managed to acquire all the bloodlines I could hear. There were only 3 main types of demons here. Unlike actual blood, Dorian could only absorb the main bloodline from a soul spell matrix. Remnant bloodlines that might exist in the original demon's blood were nowhere to be seen. Still, the hall was a very decent one. Holy High Lord, should we begin to move in on the castle? Fabian's familiar voice cut through the air as he walked up to Dorian, a long spear in his hands. An eager smile could be seen on the warrior's face as he respectfully nodded at Dorian. Dorian had relied heavily on twisting fate in the past battle. As a result of that, he had made some truly extraordinary and fantastic kills, some that looked as if they should have been impossible. His maneuvers had not gone unnoticed. Every shade in the army was taking time to glance at him with adoration in their eyes, even the ones brought here by Mello. Fabian seemed to be basking in Lord Inigo's glory. He was quite an odd character. Fabian, tell me more about these castles. You told me you'd gathered intelligence about them. Dorian took a moment to glance over at the castle. The ominous feeling he got whenever he looked at the castle proper remained. He also felt an odd draw towards this castle, a desire to go inside and find something. These 2 feelings were very conflicting and made him suspicious. Of course, his most pressing need still existed. He needed to find treasure so he could afford the medicine he needed to heal Helena and escape. He also needed to play the part of Lord Inigo to maintain his cover. He couldn't exactly just turn around and leave now. This is one of the 7 outer castles that circles the surface of Moria. Several times one or more of these castles has been virtually destroyed, wiped from existence. They always seem to come back, however, through some strange, abstruse magic that no one understands. Fabian began to point as he spoke, looking all around. The captain had put himself in charge of information gathering before they left, talking to all the other shades to merge all the information everyone knew about Moria together. Seeing as everyone here was someone prepared to take on the glorious mission of cleansing Moria, quite a few people here knew several things about the exotic world. When everything was combined together, a very full picture of what they were dealing with could be seen. There is one other castle, the Emperor's Castle, located within the center of the circle that the 7 outer castles form. It has never been destroyed, due to the odd, distorted field that surrounds it. Legend has it that the treasure store of the Emperor lies in this castle, untouched by Shade Hand. As Dorian heard this tidbit, he felt his heart stir. A treasure store left behind by an Emperor. Surely that would be more than enough to get whatever he needed to heal and protect Helena. He nodded sharply at the idea. As you can no doubt feel, Holy High Lord, the exotic world of Moria has almost no access to the laws of the universe. Casting spells and using the power of law is still possible, but the effects are greatly weakened. Fabian continued to explain as he saw Dorian nod. In range of the Emperor's castle, however, it is impossible to access any of the laws. Magic cannot be used, even powerful artifacts are temporarily unable to be activated. It is as if energy itself is frozen there. Fabian's voice contained an edge of warning as he spoke here, alongside frustration as he continued. Only the power of one's physique matters there, and even for the strongest of shades, those that can train their physique to an extremely powerful level are very rare. Even I, as a king-class mystic martial artist, have middling physical strength at best. One and all, the vast majority of shades, and most other humanoids, depend on the power of law. Fabian sighed and held his hands out to the side as if it couldn't be helped. Laws cannot be accessed at all while in there? Huh, Dorian's eyes flashed. A place where only physique mattered, where magic and artifacts don't work. Is it some type of dead zone? Would abilities work there? As he thought it over, a thought struck him. My transformations come with some extremely powerful physiques. Even if I can't use the power of law, I should still be able to handle myself. In fact, I am very well suited for a situation like this. While the loss of his perfect body ability, and various laws, would impact his strength, it wouldn't be as dire as it would be for the shades. If it's like that, I have to give it a try. He mentally came to a conclusion. If the opportunity arose, he would take on the final castle and actually try to cleanse the demonic ruins. But first, alright, let's take on this castle. Woo, charge forward. The shades in Dorian's army cheered, their enthusiasm as strong as ever. While some of them were still recovering from injuries and all had spent energy, they all had plenty of strength to spare. Every shade here had come to Moria fully prepared, with either pills or restorative medicine, or practice at using techniques that didn't wear them out fully. Scouts, go in first. Keep a coordinated entry and sound the alarm if you encounter any enemies or traps. Fabian took command, his voice authoritative as he organized the invasion. Various shades split off into groups as they leapt down from the castle walls, approaching the inner courtyard and front entrance of the foreboding castle. Dorian's eyes flashed as he looked at it, looking deeper towards the dangerous aura he could sense. Even though the other shades couldn't sense it, they doubtless were aware that the castle itself would contain great danger. Without hesitation, Dorian quickly joined the rest of the shades, his face expressionless as he moved forward. On a planet not far from Moria, a very different scene was taking place. A large red stone plateau stood upright in the middle of a vast ocean. This plateau was worn and weathered by the coarse weather of the sea, piercing more than 100 meters into the air from the tumultuous waves below. A stiff breeze blew across this plateau, rustling through the air. On this plateau, if one looked closely, a small building could be seen, one that was carved directly from the plateau itself. This building blended into the rock, practically invisible unless one was right next to it. A few windows opened the single-story rocky building up to the outside air, allowing sunlight to waver in. Inside the building, there was a large round table with 7 seats placed equally around it. The table, the seats, and everything in here was carved from the same red stone, worn by time and the ocean breeze. At this exact moment, strange green light began to flicker in this abandoned, random building out in the middle of nowhere. Whoosh! Sparks of green light fluttered into the air. Gradually, energy began to fluctuate, the entire inside of the building starting to glow. This energy was powerful and vitriolic. If a wise onlooker was to describe it in a single word, it would inevitably be demonic. As the energy flooded into the room, however, the powerful glow found itself unable to escape the confines of the building. Despite there being several open windows, not even a hint of energy could leave the stone chambers. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A flurry of noise rang out as several figures abruptly appeared, out of nowhere. 5 separate, darkly robed and vaguely humanoid figures, each sitting in one spot or another around the carved table. All of them wore blank, white masks, hiding their identity in case prying eyes could see them. The magic that was cast around this building made it impossible for any noise or light to escape, but certain powerful types of scrying fate magic would be capable of seeing through the protective barrier surrounding the stone structure. Even the strongest fate magic spells would be limited to what was visible, however, unable to eavesdrop. 2 seats were conspicuously empty. Sigh, why is Duke Orbit not here? A robed and masked figure sitting on one side complained, a feminine voice full of irritation. Despite her annoyance, her every word drawled with a promise of seduction. When does he ever show up on time, Danielle? The oaf takes his law of sloth practice far too literally. A large, burly-looking figure proclaimed from beneath his robes, shaking his head. 15 is absent as well? He has chosen to not report in? I still don't trust our newest member. An elderly, wavering voice broke in, motioning at one of the other empty seats. It is as I reported before, and 15 is in the same lot as us. He has a demonic inheritance of his own. I already said I was fine with continuing to use fake names when he's present, for now at least. The voice of Hallow, the warrior that was currently hunting for the Wrath Inheritor who just so happened to be Dorian, echoed out. He's engaged with the target I now believe to be an Inheritor of Wrath. Oh, so we have found the Inheritor? The last of the 5 figures, a man with a sharp voice, hidden behind a black robe and blank mask, cut in. Yes, but there's trouble. Hallow responded with a sigh, looking over at the other members of the Council of Demons. The Inheritor has been found, but I no longer believe he has good intentions. Hallow began, and was then promptly interrupted. What do you mean, he doesn't have good intentions? The sultry female voice was full of sharp intelligence as she cut in. Control yourself, mistress of lust. Let the man talk. The elderly man of the group rebuked the female, his voice scathing. You dare to lecture me on control, Baron Radisho? You let your gluttony control you more often than no. Listen here, BITC. Everyone, please. Hallow's voice burst out across the room, full of anger as he broke in. This is vitally important to the success of our kind. Our plans to transform the Shade race could falter here at the midway point if we do not act quickly. An abrupt silence coated the room as all the robed figures froze, turning to look at Hallow, shocked. I have reason to believe that the Inheritor of Wrath is currently heading to Moria. In fact, he may already be there now. Hallow held a hand up, cutting off replies before they could interrupt them as he continued. No, not to accept the inheritance of Wrath there. Or at least, not just that. But instead, he is traveling there to destroy the inheritances. Hallow's words boomed with force as he explained. The being I believe to be the Inheritor is a Shade known as Lord Inigo Montoya. He has currently gathered a sizable army, full of Lord and King class experts, and has headed to Moria with the intent of cleansing it. His militant force has attracted considerable attention and indirectly received the support of the Church of Light. Hallow's eyes flashed underneath the blank white mask he wore as he continued. With his understanding of one of the 7 great laws, he will be able to get past the defenses that would stop non-believers. He has become an inside agent, one that brought an entire holy army with him. Something like this has never happened before and was never a part of our plans. Hallow finished with one more line, his words calm. And if we don't stop him and his army, then it is my belief that Moria and the inheritances on there, left by the Demon Emperor himself, will perish. For a few moments, no one talked. A moment after, pandemonium erupted. What, an entire army? Inigo Montoya? I've heard of his tale. He is the Inheritor of Wrath? The darling of the Church of Light? We must act immediately. We cannot risk the inheritances being destroyed, not when we still have yet to convert enough shades. The Black Elder is right. If we lose the inheritances, our plans to infiltrate and transform the Shade race will falter. We will be forced to return to the ways of old, waiting for warriors to sense one of the 7 great laws without the assistance offered by the ruins of Moria. Everyone seemed to be speaking at once, voices bouncing back and forth as the rest of the Demon Council realized the seriousness of the situation. However, Hallow butted in, his voice booming as he drew everyone's attention. 15 is on Moria, trying to stop the false inheritor. I, myself, am closing in as we speak, and will arrive on planet soon. Unfortunately, there are several King-class fighters, and a vast number of Lord-class warriors and wizards, with the false inheritor. Hallow waved at the other members of the council. We have so little time left, the options are limited. By the time we gathered and sent any number of our subordinates over, everything would already be settled. Moria wasn't a world close to the home base of any of the members of the Demon Council. I'd like to suggest that all of you use the castle lodestone you obtained when you obtained part of an inheritance to warp through chaotic space to Moria. The council must act personally to preserve our place in the future. Hallow nodded slowly as he looked at them all. I am close enough that I don't need to shatter mine. I should arrive in the vicinity of the planet tomorrow. Everyone sitting around the table exchanged glances. To shatter the castle lodestone for something like this, single-use items that are capable of instantly warping someone away are extremely rare. It's a bit of a waste to use it on this. The burly figure spoke up, his voice hesitant. Damal, if the ruins of the Emperor are destroyed, the lodestone will fall to dust anyway. It will serve no use at all then, in addition to all our years of planning and effort coming to a dead end. Hallow sharply pointed out, How certain are you that this Lord Inigo is what you say he is? Danielle, the mistress of lust, jumped in, her sultry voice tinged with a hint of worry. Hallo sighed. The false inheritor is a veritable savant, possessing a mind capable of the most delicate subterfuge. His intellect and foresight are incredible. He has played me, the church, and everyone else all like a fiddle. I am certain he is what I say he is. Hallo shook his head. If it weren't for the overwhelming strength we possess as a group, I would fear to face up against him. His actions, his skill in manipulation, if I hadn't gotten lucky and happened upon his trail by chance, it's quite possible he would have remained completely undetected. All I can say is that we absolutely must face this threat down immediately. Hallo's voice grew cold. This, Lord Inigo, is a genius whose depth of knowledge and confidence cannot be underestimated. Oh God, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is all going to end horribly. Dorian covered his face with his hands as he looked out at the ridiculous situation in front of him. It had all happened so quickly after they entered the castle, he could scarcely believe the situation he was now in. He was standing in a large bedroom, covered in silk carpets, a silken bed, fancy furniture and pillows, all coated with friendly colors. The mysterious outer castle on Moria that was filled with a foreboding aura was nowhere to be seen. 3 gorgeous, scantily clad human women could be seen in this room alongside Dorian. One girl lounging on a couch and wearing nothing but a pair of pink panties and a scarf. She had long blonde hair and bright blue eyes that looked at Dorian with deep desire. Another was resting on the silk bed, a redhead covered in freckles, wearing a dress that was so skimpy and transparent, Dorian wondered if it even qualified to be called a dress. Her voluptuous figure was visible through it, doing nothing to hide her charms. The last girl was sitting down in a plush chair near him, a brunette wearing a pretty green bra, consciously spreading her legs open. Dorian resisted the urge to blush as he saw this, mentally cursing. I have to do what to these girls to escape this magical ray trap? Chapter 183 Stairs. Several minutes prior, Dorian and the other shades had entered the castle. Several scouts were deployed, sent off in groups to search certain corridors and report back what they found. The rest of the group was actually waiting in the main entrance hall of the castle. The first room one came into was a large stone hall, with arching pillars supporting a high ceiling and a checkered stone floor. Faintly glowing crystals were set on the walls, giving the mostly desolate stone a more cheerful look. The first thing Dorian's army did when they entered, after setting up a temporary base while they waited for the scouts to report back, caused him to pause. Where's the salt? Is there more of that warping turkey? That stuff is delicious. They set up a buffet. Cheers to a glorious battle. A long table had been constructed from what several shades had carried in their spatial rings. On that table was a long line of delicious foods. Cooked warping turkey legs, fried plum lizard tails, crystal water, melon bread. Dorian's mouth was watering as he stared at the feast. Holy High Lord, please, come join us. We'll need to keep our strength high for when we face the forces of evil. Fabian saw that Dorian had held himself back and waved over at him, pointing with a stick of chicken. Besides Fabian were the other 2 captains, digging in. Dorian glanced to the left. Even Mello was eating, chomping on a ripe banyan berry fruit. Aren't we in enemy territory, in an enemy castle? The shades didn't seem to be particularly worried, though several guards had been set up, rotating out as others ate their fill, watching the several hallways that led off from the throne room. Rumble. Dorian felt his stomach rumble. Far too often he depended on his growth points to make up for his hunger, focusing on meditation and strength instead of enjoying the taste of food. I might as well make a brief exception. He walked forward. Cheers. Praise the great hero, Lord Inigo. Several minutes passed by as all the shades ate their fill, including Dorian. The delicious taste of buttered turkey legs, soft and cool fruit, sweet and tangy meat. It was a feast that was magical. In that time, several of the injured shades had managed to recover from their injuries, the medicines they brought with them healing them. A few had brought energy-restoring medicines, though they weren't too effective when it came down to using law energy. It was around then, as the shades were cleaning up, saving some leftovers for the scouts, that the shades that were sent off returned. There were 5 pathways that led out of this entrance room. 4 of them were small side passages that were placed off near the corners, while one was a large, open and arched stone passage, towering near the back. The scouts reported to Fabian in quick order. Fabian then came over and relayed everything to Dorian. The other two captains and Mello had all joined him, waiting patiently. 4 of the paths lead to various chambers that are magically sealed. Some of them appear to have rare or precious objects, like natural treasures, powerful-looking artifacts, and more locked away, while others are empty. There weren't any traps or guards on anything, which seemed rather suspicious. Dorian's eyes flashed when he heard this. Rare treasures. Excellent. Just what I'm looking for. He had been told that great treasure could be found on Moria presently, and had been found before in the past, but until he directly heard about it from the scouts, he had felt subtly uneasy. With the reassurance that they had found stuff, one worry in his heart was settled. He would likely be able to afford any of the healing medicine he wanted for Helena now. Oh, and the 5th path? Dorian broke off his thoughts as he saw Fabian looking at him expectantly, tossing out a response. That is the main path. Down it is a large red carpet that leads to what looks like a throne room. A long set of stairs led up to the platform that holds the throne. The scouts found that, no matter what they tried, it was impossible to fly or reach the throne through any other way except by the stairs. Fabian paused and then continued. However, none of them successfully managed to climb the stairs. Powerful pressure crashes into the soul, pressure that is far too much for any of them to bear. Dorian frowned slightly as he heard this. The ominous aura that he could sense all seemed to be coming from the main path. Even if the side paths have enough treasure, I should still check this out. The real Lord Inigo would too. He made up his mind. Have the men split off and gather the treasures in the side paths. However, do 2 paths at a time, and I want Captain Horbold and Captain Ira to be on one team each, in case a resurgence of the demonic remnants happens. Dorian made his will known, his voice commanding. Yes, Holy High Lord. Yes, great hero. The 2 captains bowed and then began to walk over to their own respective troops, organizing them. As for the rest, including Mello's men, let's all head to the throne room and see this in person. Dorian's eyes flashed. Fabian nodded and bowed. He then turned to face the shades. They were currently in the process of picking up and putting up the tables they'd spread out. Ready up, shades. We're about to move out. Cheers. Here. A few minutes after that, they found themselves moving down a long stone hallway. Every step Dorian took, the ominous but familiar aura grew stronger and stronger. He felt a sort of nervous tension build in his heart. In what felt like no time at all, they arrived in the room the scouts had described. A grand, large and towering room unfolded before him. The floor was made of cool, blue-tiled stone. Several large, crystal pillars supported the high, arching ceiling and provided a cool, relaxing light. At the back and center of the room, Dorian could see the long, towering stairs that Fabian had mentioned, one with 100 separate steps on it. They were black and sleek, cut sharply. Just by stepping into the room, Dorian could feel the might of this stone edifice. They contained a type of special strength or power. Just by looking at them, he felt oppressed. At the same time, another feeling, the ominous aura, became overpowering. He could sense this aura coming from directly atop the stone stairs. The shades seemed to unconsciously sense this, tensing up. What on earth is it from? This is the room, great hero. Fabian's voice boomed out, ignoring the stately authority the room was filled with. As he spoke, all the watching shades seemed to relax, feeling at ease. He does have the talent for commanding. Dorian noted. So these stairs are ones that are hard to climb, huh? He walked towards the center of the room, a small frown on his face. Allow me to test it first, great hero. Fabian would have none of that, hurriedly rushing ahead to check the stairs for any traps. The other shades, in the meanwhile, all moved forward as well, watching the scene unfold before them. Mello stayed in the background, his eyes scanning everywhere as if he was looking for someone. Dorian raised his hands in the air as he waited, his senses tingling. The air here is odd. It's obviously been affected by something. He moved his arm back and forth. It moved normally, but it still felt subtly off. Instinctively, Dorian knew that if he tried to jump, his body would only be able to move about a meter off the ground before slowing. There was no way to go up in this room except by the stairs in front of them. I wonder if you can climb in through the roof? He looked up and then shook his head. He got the feeling that a countermeasure of some sort was in place to stop that. Hup! Fabian took a single step onto the staircase. Immediately he froze, his entire body trembling for a second. He took a step back, off the staircase. Incredible, he stepped back on it and froze yet again. After a moment's pause he took a second step, and then a third. Great hero, it is as the scouts say. The stairs are magical, they force you down as you try to go up them. It is as if a great boulder has settled upon my shoulders, slowing my steps. Fabian's voice echoed as he took several more steps. A heavy, king-class aura of might burst out of him as he drew upon his strength, taking several more steps in a flurry. Dorian watched this all. He could see Fabian's shoulders shake as he moved, his legs shivering. Woo, Captain Fabian, charge bravely. The shades were still having a great time, enjoying this as if it was a show. Several of them even clapped, making Dorian inwardly shake his head. After climbing about halfway up the grand staircase, Fabian's movements greatly slowed. A sheen of sweat could be seen soaking his forward and his every step fell to a crawl. The shade was visibly struggling, his chest heaving from exertion. He was just a bit past the halfway point when he completely came to a standstill. Muscles bulged in his arms and legs as he pulled on every iota of willpower he had, trying to move one more step. Hup! Finally, with a look of defeat, Fabian jumped backwards, his body hurtling down as he left the staircase. Oddly enough, instead of a large outward jump, his jump took him all the way down the stairs, as if he was on a zip line. There seemed to be some type of barrier not allowing him to jump freely. He climbed 56 steps. As Fabian landed, one of the onlooking shades remarked, "Oh wow, did you see how much effort he put in? King class is truly king class. I probably wouldn't make it up even a dozen steps." Murmurs broke out, ones that Fabian ignored but still smiled, his face flushed. "It should be safe, great hero. Merely, the pressure it puts on you is truly incredible. It seems to increase every 10 steps by a large amount. I was barely able to move past the 50th step." Fabian took several heaving breaths, patting himself on the chest. "Wow, if even the king class might user couldn't make it, what chance do I have, even if I use the law of valor and my perfect body ability?" Dorian mused quietly. He was quite strong, but in his shade form, he highly doubted he would be able to compare to Fabian with his king-class law of might. All the shades turned to look at Dorian expectantly. Their eyes were full of hope and spirit, trembling as they looked upon their mighty hero. He internally sighed, "Welp, I've really boxed myself in now. At least I'm still only Lord class, it would only be normal for me to fail too." A seed of worry planted itself in his heart, however, as he considered the image he needed to maintain. Without hesitating, Dorian walked up to the stairs and put a single foot on the first step. Whoosh. For a brief instant, he felt a large amount of pressure settle onto him. That pressure was colossal, like a boulder crashing down on his back, just like Fabian had said. However, as that pressure settled upon his shoulders, it seemed to waver briefly. His soul shivered, a small amount of energy drifting out of it. He felt as if his soul was interacting not only with this pressure, but also with the stairs themselves. If he had to describe the interaction, he would say it felt faintly demonic in nature, as if some of the more demonic laws that he studied were activating something. Whoosh! And, just as easily as that pressure had settled upon him, it washed off, leaving him completely free and unobstructed. Chapter 184 Law. Dorian froze as he stepped onto the first step, shocked. It actually doesn't affect me at all? His thoughts were thrown into disarray as he considered this. After a moment, he went over the unique feeling he had sensed earlier, where his soul seemed to be interacting with the stairs. His jade memory made sure that, even though it happened in an instant, he had the entire exchange memorized. It's definitely because I have at least one demonic law that I've studied. It seems like it has recognized that law, and is letting me pass through? His mind raced ahead as he went to the most logical conclusion. After all, this planet was once considered the home base of the demonic race. It actually made perfect sense for there to be areas restricted to only demonic practitioners. But it still let Fabian move upward, despite being a law of might user. Maybe it's not entirely because of the laws I practice. It might be something more to do with my soul itself. Dorian instinctively felt like there was more to this. Every time he underwent a baptism of the laws of the universe, his soul was transformed slightly. Right now, his soul was very good at sensing any laws related to the 7 great sins, or the laws of the demonic race, and what Dorian personally called the 7 great virtues. He didn't know if there was an angelic race. I'll ask Asra about that later. He cut his thoughts off here as he realized he had been standing still for more than a couple seconds. The shades in the background were all watching with bated breath. He even saw one shade pull out a sort of crystal ball artifact that Dorian had read was used to record things via some type of glass magic. Hup, he took another step up the stairs. Woo, masterful lord, praise the great hero, crush those steps. The shades all cheered, Fabian included, as they watched Dorian move. All of them seemed to have great faith in his prowess. As Dorian saw this, he realized this was an excellent opportunity to cement their opinion of him. Grr. Bravely, he took several more steps, each one seemingly causing him to tremble and shake. His shoulders hunched as he began to climb forward, a valorous aura burst out around him. Slowly and steadily, Dorian began to climb the stairs. His steps were full of serene grace and power, moving without hesitation. As he crossed the 10th and 20th stair mark, all the cheering shades quieted, their eyes watching Dorian's every movement. Several of them stepped forward towards the stairs, tensing up as they prepared to try and rescue Lord Inigo, if they needed to, small seeds of worry spreading. After all, the mighty and powerful king-class mystic martial artist, Fabian of the Spear, an elder of some renown, was unable to cross the 50th stair mark. If Lord Inigo truly pushed himself, it was possible he might get seriously injured or even die. Despite their worries, all the watching shades looked on as Lord Inigo ignored all of this, nobly pushing onward. When he reached the 30th step, Dorian's shoulders quivered slightly. That shake alone almost sent all the shades to the floor as they called out. Holy High Lord, careful, don't push yourself too far, great hero. You are only still Lord class. Our faith in you shall remain unchallenged. Several of them had voices filled with concern. Even Captain Fabian joined in, trying to encourage Dorian to go slowly. After all, even he had been thrown down, and he was a king-class fighter. At that, Dorian paused. Slowly, he turned around, looking down at the shades that were poised to come rescue him. Who do you all think that I am? His voice boomed out, shaking the air. Dorian twisted on fate slightly, willing for it to sound as majestic as possible to the shades down below. The shades all stood, transfixed and frozen as they were swept up in Dorian's aura and words. Mello simply rolled his eyes. My name, as he spoke, his voice fluctuated with raw power, is Inigo Montoya, B-O-O-M. An explosion of energy rolled off his shoulders as he finished the sentence, almost causing some of the shades down below to faint. I am here on a mission to cure my wife and kill the being with 6 fingers on his right hand. Boom. I am here to cleanse Moria. Boom. I am here to do what is right. Boom. Every successive sentence rocked the onlookers. Even Mello seemed affected, glancing at Dorian with worship in his eyes for a moment before he caught himself and then glared at Dorian as if it was his fault. Have faith. Dorian finished speaking, turning his back to them. Great hero. We are not worthy. Praise. Several of the shades broke out in tears, yelling apologies as they bowed and backed up. Fabian looked on all of this proudly, his arms crossed as if he hadn't, just a moment ago, been yelling for Dorian to be careful as well. With the cheers of the shades at his back, Dorian strove on proudly. He soon passed the 30th step and crossed onto the 40th, his plodding progress seemingly inevitable. When he reached the 50th step, the place where the pressure on Captain Fabian had greatly increased, everyone became hushed, not daring to make a sound. Hup, he bravely kept walking forward. For Dorian, all of this had been a breeze. There's really no pressure. He smiled internally. This was quite a convenient way to impress his followers. The higher up he moved, however, the stronger the ominous aura that he could sense became. It weighed down on him, filling him with unease. It didn't feel dangerous, just, he couldn't quite explain it in words. To him, it felt like something tragic had happened here in the past, long ago. While his thoughts were muddled, Dorian absent-mindedly climbed all the way to the 80th step before he realized it. Down below, all the shades looked on. Their eyes no longer held a trace of shock. Instead, it was pure, fanatic faith. His ability to move past the step that had thrown back even a king-class warrior like Fabian, famed for his power, and bear it steadily all the way up so high had won them all over completely, putting to rest any doubt that any of them may have sheltered in their hearts. All of them now, one and all, believed that Lord Inigo could truly do anything he attempted. Not a single soul there, with the sole exception of Mello, thought otherwise. He is the greatest hero of the Shade race. Praise the light, praise Lord Inigo, he is the chosen one. Some of the Shades were even tearing up. Dorian actually felt kind of bad for them. Mello eyed all the fanatic Shades askance and then turned his eyes up towards Dorian, as if impressed by his handiwork. If Mello had known Dorian had never intended for all of this to happen in the first place, his opinion might have been a bit different. When Dorian reached the 95th step, he took one last glance at all the Shades. He made his entire body shake, as if he was bearing a burden so great it was death-defying. He slowly raised his hand in a fist. Lord Inigo, praise ye the light, woo, as if by some hidden signal, a cacophony of cheers was unleashed from the crowd, pure pandemonium. Dorian nodded gravely as he saw this, and turned back to his quest. He put his foot on the 95th step, then the 96th, the 98th, the 99th, and finally, the 100th step, the one that was part of the platform itself. As he stepped on it, he could finally see the platform. It was set as a large, gray square of stone, finely cut and sharp-edged. It was devoid of almost any decoration, save for two visible objects. One was a throne, set in the back of the platform. It was a tall creation, covered in circular symbols and markings. The other object was a large, black tube that was stuck out of the ground, surrounded on the sides by a cage of metal. As Dorian looked at it, the ominous aura that he sensed almost overwhelmed him, his mind rocketing. It's coming from that tube, he realized instantly. He raised his other foot and set it down as he came to that conclusion, fully stepping onto the platform. The instant he did, as he moved forward out of sight from the Shades down below, a flash of light blinded Dorian's eyes. An image of the stark throne in front of him filled his eyes for the briefest second. Right after that, he fainted. When he came to, he found himself in a mysterious room full of scantily clad women. That was his present situation. Surrounded by a trio of luscious girls that were barely clothed, all of them looking at Dorian with intense desire. What? As he sat there shocked, trying to come to terms, a piece of innate knowledge appeared in his mind. This was a magic array of some sort, one that had trapped him, created by a combination of complex spells and artifacts. To get out of it, he would need to complete the challenge it held. The knowledge of what he had to do had instinctively appeared in his head thanks to the array itself. It wanted him to take these women in some kind of magic fantasy orgy. The wet dream of many a schoolboy back on Earth. By doing so, he would complete whatever challenge or trial this was and be rewarded. I refuse. Dorian outright put his foot down, his eyes enraged as he looked around. A voice appeared in Dorian's head, humming with confusion. As Dorian heard this voice, once more, innate knowledge appeared in his mind. It seemed that the magic array he was in would inform him of certain things if he was confused, something he found rather convenient, though also unsettling. How is it doing that? He thought, his eyes narrowing. Meanwhile, the voice continued to speak. A voice that he now knew was an array genie, a similar creation when compared to Asra. A relatively autonomous consciousness of magic. Why are you resisting the inheritance ceremony? You have been found worthy. Please proceed with the ceremony. The voice echoed in his head. Asra, can you hear that? He queried, asking his own soul spell matrix genie. Yes, it is an energy signal that communicates directly with your soul, through a connection that was formed the moment you entered this array. Asra replied, her voice cool. Can you do anything about this situation? He asked, hopeful. No. Her reply was rather deadpan. Do you know anything else about arrays? No. All right, never mind. He rolled his eyes and smiled. His soul spell matrix genie only seemed to ever know anything about creatures, using the knowledge inscribed upon his soul spell matrix. If she really was a remnant of the wise lady's soul spell matrix, he couldn't fault the autonomous genie. You have been invited here freely, yes? Then accept the inheritance. This is a huge opportunity. The array genie's voice was full of irritation as it spoke again, a voice that felt decidedly intelligent, like a real, living being. Before Dorian's eyes, a translucent bubble appeared in front of him in the fancy room. This bubble had a rather ethereal air to it, slowly bobbing up and down. I can't accept this inheritance, not when it's like this. Dorian shook his head, staunch in his refusal as he looked at the bubble. What? The array genie controlling the array stuttered. I'm kind of seeing someone right now. Dorian continued, shrugging. Single quote ellipsis single quote. The voice of the array genie. I can sense that you're lying from the wavelengths in your soul. The array genie's voice seemed to be filled with a sensation of victory, as if it would convince Dorian to accept now. Okay. Well, it's not official yet, but it's pretty close. Dorian freely admitted, shrugging a second time. Trust me, I got this one in the bag. Hee hee. Oi, don't you judge me, you freaky ghost bubble. Romance takes time, you gotta take it slow. Especially if the girl you're interested in is a freakishly talented warrior. My mission. The array genie's voice seemed almost as if it was broken before it continued. This is a grand inheritance set up by the demon emperor himself. The array genie continued, something that would vastly enhance your power. You can gain access to an entirely new law. That's right, I can sense you already have some demonic laws you could follow in his glory's footsteps. Yeah, let me stop you right there. Dorian shook his head. The way things have been going, I highly doubt I won't be able to get this law on my own. I'm kind of lucky, you know? Things usually go my way. With his ability to manipulate fate and extremely unique soul, as well as all the other laws he had picked up, Dorian was confident in what he said. His jade memory meant he just needed a single taste of a law and he would be able to achieve it. So this is gonna be a no from me, dog. He waved at the floating bubble dismissively. Now tell me, how'd I get out of this place? Can I just break it down with some laser beams? He ignored the scantily clad women, figuring that they were merely illusions and not real people at this point, not that that changed his mind. I'm sorry, but you are getting this inheritance whether you want it or not. The array genie seemed to sigh, its voice defeated. What? No, I already told you. I don't consent. It's a magical inheritance. The ceremony was triggered the moment you stepped in here, even I can't stop it. There is certainly nothing you can do to stop it. If you won't take it in the willing form like this, then you will receive it in the traditional energy transfer way. As the bubble spoke, the scantily clad women blurred and then all reappeared, standing around Dorian in various seductive poses. All three were gorgeous, like women from Dorian's dreams. Each one was a perfect 10 in pure looks, a ravishing beauty in their own rights. Bubble, how could you? I trusted you. Dorian glared at it reproachfully. At the same time, as he kept its attention, he began to gather his will, ready to fully defend himself. Only, he found that everything he tried to do had no effect. His soul, his powers, they all seemed to have vanished. It was as if only his mind was here, for something he had no control over. In fact, he couldn't even physically move now. Except this lustful inheritance. The bubble yelled out, its voice full of righteous indignation, as if it had never encountered a situation like this before where it was unjustly accused. No. Dorian's eyes widened as he felt the girls reach out for him. Panic filled his heart as he thought of Helena. After all, he was technically a virgin in this world. It was kind of dumb, but he had decided that he wanted his first time to be with her. No, my chastity, I refuse. His eyes pulsed as he pulled at everything, trying to make his body move, all to no avail. The three girls all laid a hand on his head. Immediately, dark, scandalous knowledge and energy flowed into his mind. WHOSH. As the knowledge and sensation of energy flooded into Dorian, he also felt something else. Another source of energy that he could just barely sense, one that tapped into the very edges of his awareness. At the exact same time, Dorian felt two completely opposite sources of energy appear at the corner of his mind. One full of sultry, riveting energy, while the other was full of devout, chaste power. Somehow, in the same instant, Dorian managed to simultaneously grab hold of both the law of lust and the law of chastity. Helena. Back on Shaptal, in the depths of the city of Kractal, in a fancy inn-room. Helena abruptly sat up from her meditation, her eyes blazing. After a moment, she paused in confusion. Why'd I suddenly feel like I should be murdering someone? Chapter 185 Chains. The sensation of the two laws overloaded Dorian's senses for a brief moment. The completely opposing forces swarmed within his soul, energy greedily flooding in as he grasped at them. He intended to use the energy to protect himself. After all, he hadn't been able to even move when that evil bubble was keeping him still. Anything that could power him up to break out was something he would grab hold of. As he reached for this energy, however, a somewhat familiar feeling settled upon him. Fluctuating energy washing his soul in power, crackling light that shivered around him, increasing the strength of his soul, a oneness with the world around him. He was undergoing a baptism of the laws of the universe. And not just a single baptism of the laws, but two at the same time. And not a normal baptism, either. For, the laws of the universe had a very weak presence on Moria. As a result, a large amount of strain was placed upon Dorian's soul as he forcibly drew the presence of the laws of the universe towards him. Oh dang, that was Dorian's only thought before the opposing laws of lust and chastity swarmed his mind, undulating sensations serenading him. Instantly he took several deep breaths, throwing everything else to the side as he focused fully on containing the energy. The two very different energy sources were currently trying to escape his grasp. If he let either of them go loose, they would tear into his soul, badly damaging it. Normally, this could be resolved by simply focusing on the concept and sensation of energy, absorbing it bit by bit. However, thanks to the opposing natures of the two energy sources, Dorian was forced to actively balance each one. He let one part of his soul immerse a bit of one type of energy while shifting around the other type to a different part of his soul. The primal, raw energy from the law of lust could not come into contact with the chaste, devout strength from the law of chastity, not unless Dorian had fully harmonized his soul with each law. As it stood now, his soul was trying to reject both energies. Until the baptism was finished, he wouldn't be able to freely control either power source. Dorian grunted out loud, his body shaking. As that happened, he faintly realized that he had exited that vision world where the bubble had been, returning back to the top of the stairs where the throne was. He couldn't spare any more thought for this, sweat covering his forehead as he did everything in his power to prevent his soul from rupturing. Perfect body, activate. He didn't dare to draw upon any other laws, even the ones that could power up his soul. Instead, he used what was left of his willpower to forcibly activate his perfect body ability. Immediately, the world around him lost some of its color as it faded to a grayer tone. At the same time, Dorian's mind and body were greatly enhanced. His perception of time increased, letting him see the world in slower motion. Whoosh! Dorian felt the whiplashing energy moving around in his soul and imposed his will on it, forcing it to obey him. With his perfect body ability active, he was able to more easily direct the energy, keeping it from injuring him. The ability sheared off a great deal of the stress put on him. Still, he suffered a large headache from his efforts. The work and pain his soul and mind had been put through were abnormal for even his standards. Gradually, the two opposing energy sources began to calm down. The sultry energy from the law of lust completely covered his soul, successfully imbuing it with the power to control that energy. Right after, the same thing happened, but this time for the law of chastity. As Dorian gained an instinctive level of control over each law, knowledge flooded into his aching head. Specifically, knowledge of what each law did. Once again, despite their opposing natures, Dorian discovered that the two laws had very similar effects. It seemed that the laws of the 7 great sins and 7 great virtues mirrored each other. Pride and valor were seen as opposing laws, he realized at that moment. Leader's pride centered around believing in himself for the sake of himself, while Dorian's valor centered around believing in himself for the sake of others. Both laws, despite their contrary beliefs, gave the same raw effect. Great power imbued to enhance one's physique. The law of mercy and the law of wrath were opposing laws, yet both laws gave the ability to enhance the power of your attacks, imbuing them with powerful energy that could be used to attack individually as well, if so desired. Both the law of greed and the law of charity enhanced the overall power of one's soul, granting one better offensive and defensive powers. And, now, as Dorian picked up both the law of lust and the law of chastity, he realized what they brought to the table. Both laws gave powers that were related to both the soul and the mind. The laws didn't give powers that were solely one or the other, but ones that mixed with both. The two laws enhanced the power of one's mind, allowing one to think clearer and faster, granting the ability to multitask multiple things at once. But, more importantly in Dorian's eyes, the two laws affected one's perception of time. And not only in the mind or soul, but also the perception of time for his body as well, at a physical, base level as he interacted with reality. His eyes flashed as he realized what this meant. When I draw upon these two laws, it'll be like when I use my perfect body ability, only stronger. He could instinctively tell that by using each law, the world around him would slow down. Or, rather, he would speed up. From his perspective, however, it would slow down. The amount he could enhance his perception of time would start at a rather small amount, and increase with his understanding of the two laws. How exactly much it would enhance his perception of time would be something he figured out on another day. Wow, that's an incredibly useful power. It's just like the power I had in that dream vision a while ago, back in the life years dream zone. He muttered, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. All right, damn ghost bubble. Maybe your inheritance wasn't that bad after all. Still, to try and force it on me. He shook his head, mentally rebuking the uncaring Ure genie. Status. He called his status to mind, feeling a sizable increase in the power of his soul. Dorian, soul status, soul stage. Lord class, pseudo king. Health. Perfect. Energy. 215, 877 230,900. Oh man, another big increase. Soon I'll overtake what the genius vice head of the diamond department had achieved in terms of raw energy. He smiled at the thought. Abruptly, Dorian's thoughts were broken as he looked around, jerking himself to awareness. He was currently kneeling on the floor of the large, stone platform. The stark throne he had seen lay against the wall before him, solemn and foreboding. Directly in front of him was the stone tube he had seen before, covered by a metal cage. The source of the uneasy, ominous aura he could feel. Dorian took several deep breaths, waiting for his constant regeneration to kick in and help lessen his aching head, as he studied the tube. He frowned slightly as he looked at it, leaning closer. Now that I'm up here, I might as well figure out what you are. He had just gained quite a bit from being up here and it was very likely he would never return. The ominous aura this tube gave off might be unnerving, but it also drew Dorian in. He could feel a connection to it, now that he was so close, a connection he felt in his soul. Is it related to the Demon Emperor? His eyes narrowed as he studied it. Slowly, he raised his hand till it was hovering over the top of it. As he did this, he flinched, his eyes widening. For the moment his hand was placed directly above the tube, raw sparks of energy began to flow around the metal cage that kept the tube securely locked to the dais. Dorian could visibly make out some sort of green symbol glowing atop the previously smooth surface of the tube. He stared at the symbol, unblinking. He felt a strange familiarity here, as if he knew what this was. The cage that surrounded the sides of the stone tube also felt oddly familiar, though he couldn't quite place why. After a moment, however, he came up with nothing. He didn't remember ever actually seeing it before, not at any point while he had the Jade memory ability. At least, nothing that was a perfect match. Is it like the array? Related to the Demon Emperor? Given the location of the tube, it seemed like a likely guess. He studied it for a few more moments before sighing. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. He put his entire body on high alert as he reached down with his right hand, his left hand ready to jerk his arm back if needed. He would even go so far as to cut his arm off, knowing he could regrow it using his growth points. He grasped the top of the stone tube, his hand clenching down upon the shining glyph. Immediately, an electrifying flow of energy covered his body. It set his cells to tingling. A warm, dazzling feeling seemed to hit every cell in his body. As this occurred, Dorian felt something strange. He didn't get a feeling of danger. In fact, the ominous aura seemed to have completely disappeared. Instead, WHOOSH. A mental image filled Dorian's mind. A vision of a world that was teeming with life. Beautiful grass, plentiful trees, a plethora of wildlife and plants. Beautiful rivers and rocky mountains, sweeping plains and vast oceans. A world that looked like a virtual paradise. As this vision bloomed in his mind, it began to change. From out of nowhere, hundreds of large, metal chains appeared, each one thicker than a mountain. These chains were full of foreboding and powerful energy that seemed to seal the planet itself. For, as these chains appeared, the planet began to wither. Life fled from it, energy coming to a still. The laws of the universe weakened, their presence almost vanishing completely. These chains, they are what caused this world to die. Moria is a frozen, lifeless planet because of them. An epiphany struck Dorian as he witnessed this, the knowledge from the tube pouring in. And if I truly want to cleanse Moria, I need to remove these chains. The thought processed in his mind for a moment. And these chains, they are inherently connected to this metal tube. And not just this one, but several other ones. Dorian could feel a connection between the tube he was holding and the chains, but only for a portion of the chains. But a small number, nevertheless. The reason the castles reappear even after they are destroyed is probably related to this. This must be some sort of grand secret of this world, something that the demon emperor left behind. All the pieces to the puzzle fit together in his mind as he nodded. Legends about cleansing Moria must have arisen from people that divined fate, learning that it was indeed possible. You just needed to have a special soul, or at least to have studied some demonic laws. Dorian doubted that anyone that hadn't studied a demonic law, or at least had the aptitude to, could get up the stairs. He didn't think they would make it up even if they were a pseudo-angelic expert, though he wasn't sure about angelic class experts. And if I pull out this sealing tube, for lack of a better name, I will shatter a large number of the chains, and change the world of Moria itself. His eyes flashed as he looked down at the tube, and then, without hesitating, clenched on tightly and pulled. Chapter 186 Cleanse. Clang. Nothing happened. The tube didn't move at all and remained perfectly stable. Dorian stared at it in consternation for a moment before his eyes flashed, a small smile appearing on his face. Ah, like this. Of course. He pulled on the sealing tube again, this time infusing it with energy from his soul spell matrix, activating it. Whoosh. Immediately, Dorian felt a wave of energy swarm over his body. The tingling sensation he got from the electrifying flow of energy was heightened, expanding to a throbbing burn. Despite the pain, however, Dorian could tell that he wasn't being injured. If anything, the energy that was swarming around him was actually healing any minor injuries he still had, protecting him. It was almost as if the energy was a part of him and didn't want to harm him. It was comfortable, though the sheer amount of it stretched the limit of his tolerance. Meanwhile, the world around Dorian began to undulate. Bright sparkles of red, green, and blue energy appeared in the air, streams of pure light that glowed with mystical power. The air itself began to vibrate. Dorian groaned out loud as he felt his body become so full of energy it was painful. A virtual explosion of energy and light blasted out from his body. Despite the incredible quaking of energy, the dais and throne he was standing on remained unchanged. The castle walls, roof, everything was undamaged. It was only the sensation of energy that could be felt, brutal waves of power bursting free and filling the air. I need to control this. I need to let it out gradually. In Dorian's mind, a mental image of the world being held down by thousands of chains could be seen. When he pulled this sealing tube out, around 15% of the chains had started to pull back with it, trembling. This trembling had manifested in reality as a powerful wave of energy, shaking the air. Dorian realized the seriousness of the situation as he maintained his perfect body state, taking several deep breaths as he concentrated fully on controlling the sealing tube. Distinctly, he could feel the sealing mechanism that the tube controlled. It was as if his awareness had been thrust into this weird artifact spell hybrid, giving him complete control over it. He could instinctively tell that it was something he was unable to absorb, an abnormality in itself. I need to gradually pull the tube all the way out. The more I pull it, the tighter those chains will be. They will reach their maximum level of tension right as it's about to be fully removed. The sealing tube was planted firmly in the floor of this raised dais. However, through some type of magic, it was as if the tube was planted in reality itself. By pulling it out of its spot, Dorian was functionally breaking the effect of the sealing tube. When it was fully removed, all the chains that it controlled would snap like twigs. Down below the dais, where all the shades and Mellow were currently waiting, it was as if a concussive blast had knocked them all to the ground. Most of them were clutching their heads, even Mellow, as they blearily looked around. The world around them was shaking, the very fabric of reality vibrating. Dorian grunted again as he slowly pulled, his arms screaming at him. He felt like he was trying to drag a huge, enormous mountain using his bare hands. Despite that, inch by inch, he made progress. The world around him began to fluctuate more and more. The air began to feel stretched out, as if a huge amount of tension was building. A deep, inborn fear in him began to rise as he felt like he was about to be hit with an enormous blow. It was kind of like stretching out a rubber band, back on Earth. Eventually, that rubber band was either going to break or you were going to have to let go of it. Either way, a large amount of tension and force would build up. Almost there, as the force grew, Dorian's control grew alongside it. The more he felt the energy tugging at him, the easier he found it to control the sealing tube and remove it. It was like his soul was adapting to the strain, perhaps something to do with his existence as an anomaly. Clink. Finally, Dorian felt the sealing tube reach the very tip, pulled almost all the way out. By this point, the world around Dorian was a crescendo of violent energy, cascading in the air and all about. Explosions of light and sound echoed around him, blinding and deafening. As all of this built up, Dorian made one last final jerking motion. He pulled the sealing tube fully out. Whoosh. Immediately, the mental image in Dorian's mind had shattered as the sealing tube he was holding in his hand fell to dust. Before the image dissipated, Dorian could just barely see a multitude of the massive chains being pulled to their very edge, tightened beyond reason as they impossibly tensed up for one more brief second. And then snapped. The world around Dorian changed. In a single, heart-pounding second, the terrifying feeling of tension, the fluctuating waves of energy, the chaotic lights and sounds. All of that vanished in an instant. The sudden and abrupt absence was incredibly jarring, one that shocked Dorian. He stood frozen atop the dais, his eyes widened as he looked at the world around him. Slowly, his eyes widened even more as he realized something, a smile appearing on his face. I can sense the presence of the laws of the universe. He had done it. The world around him, the presence of the various laws of the universe had been restored. As he sensed this, he drew upon some of the laws, feeling energy swell from them. He frowned slightly. It's not completely fixed. I still can't fully use the laws. He noted. Still, at least right here in this part of Moria, it's possible to use maybe 40% or 50% of any law effectively. Far more than before. He made a rough estimate, his fine senses able to keenly pick out minor details. Rip. A ripping sound caught his ears, causing him to turn around. Right where the throne was, set just in front of it, a 3-meter-tall, dimly glowing white portal had appeared. A faint, trembling tear in space that led to another location. As Dorian looked at it, he felt an odd connection to it. He instinctively knew that if he entered this portal, it would bring him to another place on Moria. To a dais just like this one, with a sealing tube and whatever inheritance the Demon Emperor had left behind. His eyes widened as he realized this. This is a lucky chance that might catapult my strength. This might be my ticket. If I can clear out all the sealing tubes, not only can I cleanse Moria for real, cementing my reputation and fully protecting Helena and myself, I can also greatly enhance my strength. The thoughts flew through his mind, excitement burning in him. As he realized this, he heard loud cheers echoing in the air. He broke off his chain of thoughts, walking over to the edge of the dais. He stood on the very top step, looking down the 100 steps towards where the Shades and Mellow were. Lord Inigo did it. Look, he's cleansed part of Moria. He is the legend. Praise the great hero. Cheers and shouts of joy swarmed through the air up at Dorian as devout faces all stared at him, full of glee. Shades danced for joy, celebrating. Even Dorian couldn't help but smile as he saw this, feeling their festive mood. He began to walk down the stairs, headed towards the Shades. He couldn't leave through the portal without talking to them first, after all. The pressure, it's still here? His eyes narrowed as he saw this. The pressure that forced people down the stairs remained, even with the greatly increased ability to sense the laws of the universe. In just a few short moments, he reached the cheering crowd of Shades. All of the warriors looked at him with worship in their eyes. Holy High Lord, Captain Fabian rushed forward, his voice half-rushed as he bowed. You have done it, you have cleansed Moria, woo. More cheers echoed out from the onlooking Shades. Only partially. Dorian held up his hand and shook his head, his voice calm. I have managed to weaken and break some of the chains that bind Moria, but I did not shatter all of them. You all should be able to sense this, through the laws of the universe." His tone was deep and commanding. All the celebrating shades paused and then nodded, including Fabian. They were all experts. The fact that they could only draw on half their strength was not something they would miss. "But the progress you made, Lord Inigo, does that mean we can keep going? That we can cleanse Moria entirely?" Fabian's voice boomed as he spoke, his attempt at a subtle whisper a miserable failure. Dorian paused for a moment, glancing at the shades. They were all watching him attentively. "It is possible," he began. Immediately, hushed gasps of excitement spread about the room. Before things got out of hand, he steadily added, "But to achieve it, I must take this challenge on my own. I have learned of the magic that seals Moria and I can unravel it, but you all will be of no help to me here. Your journey was in escorting me this far safely, fighting off the demonic remnants." His voice was loud and commanding, convincing every shade onlooker of its truthfulness. "You all, my loyal soldiers, must return back to Shaptal, to prepare to receive my victorious return. You must safeguard my lovely wife and ensure her safety while I destroy the last chains that hold down Moria." His every word boomed in the air, infused with his fate-twisting soul's will. There was a brief pause as all the shades stared at him wide-eyed in shock. Hesitantly, Fabian queried, "Is there no way we can help you, Holy High Lord?" His voice was full of reluctance. "No, I can only move onward alone from here, you all must leave me behind." The shades took everything he said as complete truth, none of them daring to question his words. Their faith in Dorian had long since reached an absolute level. Ukeli would be proud. Gradually, the shades all rumbled in agreement as Dorian directed Fabian to begin to retreat. The shades that had been exploring the other pathways and scooping up treasure had already returned, bringing the rare valuables with them. They hadn't run into any trouble. As a group, they all worked together, preparing to leave the castle. In the midst of this direction, Mello slunk over to stand near Dorian, eyeing him with an unknown emotion. He held out his hand to Dorian, greeting him with a warm smile. "Go on ahead without me. I am going to create a ritual to help me track down 15. We'll probably end up at the same place, eventually." Mello sent him a message that was shielded by energy as he shook his hand. "Best of luck, Lord Inigo," he said out loud for everyone else to hear. All the shades nodded, their eyes fervent. Dorian turned back towards the staircase and began to walk forward, his footsteps confident. The shades had all finished organizing by this time and were ready to leave. He climbed back up to the top of the steps, his shoulders proud and unbroken. He looked like a hero from legend, challenging higher powers. At the top of the stairs, he turned and faced the crowd of onlookers. "I, Inigo Montoya, will cleanse the rest of Moria. Prepare for my return, my loyal liberation force," he declared loudly, his voice full of valor. "Praise, great hero, Holy High Lord." Dorian stepped back away from the edge, his face impassive. After he left their field of view, he exhaled slightly. The stress of maintaining his image for so long had taken its toll on him. It was a relief to back away from it, even if it was just temporary. "I should probably don a different form if I am going to be sweeping through the other castles. Probably something more demonic." His eyes flashed as he considered the thought, nodding. Not a second later his shade body shifted and transformed, turning into his powerful balanced demon form. Dorian smiled cheerfully as he took up the form, flexing his fingers. This form was significantly stronger and tougher than his shade form was. He hadn't used this form in a while and had missed the far stronger capabilities it held. Then, without hesitation, Dorian walked up to the glowing portal that floated just in front of the throne. He eyed it for a moment before stepping forward, walking fearlessly into the portal. Whoosh! A flash of light blinded Dorian's eyes and, a second later, he vanished, teleporting away. "Mistress of Lust, what are you doing here?" "My lodestone brought me here, Radisho. It was supposed to bring me to the Castle of Lust. I would never have come to this filthy place on purpose." Two voices could be heard, arguing loudly in the middle of a large, mostly empty circular chamber. At the center of this chamber, a large, raised platform could be seen, with exactly 100 carved stone steps leading up to it, a set of stairs that went up to the platform on all sides. At the center of this platform was a stone tube, covered by a metal grate, and a bit farther behind that, a large, stone throne. Two figures could be seen, one a man and one a woman, arguing with each other. Each figure was covered in shadows, making their appearance seem illusory and vague. Whosh, Kree. A shuddering, echoing noise rang out, one that sounded like the fabric of space itself was tearing. Both of these figures turned, shock painted on what was visible of their faces, as they looked at the source of the noise. A large, glowing blue portal had appeared, in the center of the inner sanctum of the Castle of Gluttony. Oof! A new figure tumbled head over heel out of the portal, landing in an unceremonious heap on the stone floor. Dorian struggled to his feet, brushing off his shoulders as he took in his surroundings. He froze as he looked up, staring at the two figures in front of him. The two figures stared back. Dorian blinked. Hello there. Chapter 187 Disciple. Hello there. When Dorian had stepped into that portal, he felt an odd, twisting sensation. The world around him seemed to stretch while he stood absolutely still, unmoving. Energy began to swarm around him chaotically. Choosing my balanced demon form was a good idea, he noted as he felt the distorted energy knock against him. His physique was a very tough one, able to shrug off such buffets without injury. This was partly because he had maintained his perfect body ability, his caution raised to the maximum. As Dorian looked at them, his powerful eyes were able to pierce the veil of shadows that swarmed each figure. The woman was quite tall, a shade that stood just a little below 2 meters of height. She was also absolutely gorgeous. A perfect, feminine face with warm red lips and gorgeous brown eyes, a button nose, and small ears. Her brown hair was tied up haphazardly, adding to her beautiful appearance. Her figure matched her beauty, with a sensual dress clinging tightly to her large chest and curvaceous figure. A single glance at her, however, drove an incredibly odd feeling into Dorian's soul. I can sense that we study the same law. She studies the law of lust. As he realized this, her extremely attractive, almost seductive appearance made even more sense. She virtually personified the law. Not just studies, she's mastered it. She's king class. Species. Demonic shade. Class. King class, late. Maximum energy level. 2,803,771. The other figure was male, an elderly shade that was reedy and very thin. He had a heavily wrinkled face that was spotted with age. The shade wore a fine, silk robe that was covered in patterns of a snake circling around a shield. He studies a demonic law too, but one I haven't studied. Dorian instinctively could feel this as he looked at the elderly shade. Demonic law practitioners could sense other demonic law practitioners. And he's king class too. Species. Demonic shade. Class. King class, late. Maximum energy level. 2,832,500. Damn, they're both freakishly strong. Dorian cursed his luck. How could he have known he would immediately be greeted by powerful demonic practitioners as soon as he arrived? Are they demonic remnants? Part of the planet's defense force? They aren't attacking me. Who are they? He was full of questions, with few answers. Wah-hoo-how-ha. The tall woman stuttered, temporarily unable to come up with a response, as she looked at him in astonishment. It uses the law of lust? She stared. It's a demonic remnant. Quick, strike it before it attacks. It must be related to the weird state of the world and why you didn't return to the Castle of Lust. Almost immediately, the elderly man prepared to attack, without giving Dorian a chance to say anything else. Dorian felt mildly offended at being called a demonic remnant. Whoosh! Bright green energy wrapped around the elderly man, energy that covered him from head to toe in a protective barrier. This energy was powerful and gave off a unique aura, one that Dorian was faintly able to recognize as it resonated with his soul. An aura that seemed to swallow all the energy in the air, powering itself. An aura that gave off a feeling of indulgence and satisfaction. If he had to describe it one word, it would be gluttonous. The barrier coated the elderly man and was at least 5 inches, 13 centimes, thick. Hold on, before Dorian could finish speaking, the elderly shade's body blurred as he attacked. Hiya! The elderly man appeared right next to Dorian, his movements fast and sure. A powerful, rippling king-class aura emanated from him, causing the air to fluctuate. He punched out, a blurringly fast punch aimed at Dorian's chest. Hup! Dorian crossed his arms in front of him, his eyes completely serious as he focused. At the same time, he drew upon the law of valor, trying to enhance his physique. As soon as he tried, however, he noticed something. While the section of the world he had just been at had the connection to the laws of the universe greatly restored, to a point where around it was back to 40% minus 50% normal, this location did not. It wasn't as bad as it had initially been. Dorian felt like his connection to the laws here was at about 25%, much stronger than it had initially been. But still a weak pittance when compared to normal. The Shade's fist collided with Dorian's crossed arms. Thud! Dorian didn't move. A blast of wind shook the air in the closed-off room, causing the shadowy darkness that partially hid the appearance of each shade to fall away, not that it obstructed Dorian in the first place. I blocked it? Dorian's mind raced ahead of him as he managed to fully block the brunt of the attack, his body flexing as he pulled upon his powerful physique and perfect body, as well as the law of valor. He had managed to completely nullify the attack without any negative effects to himself. He hadn't even needed his mystic armored body ability to kick in. But, it must be the laws. At only around 25% strength, the strength of these two demonic shades is greatly weakened, while my powerful physique and perfect body greatly boosts me. He instantly reached a conclusion, his eyes flashing. Two screens appeared as he had Asra adjust the values of the two foes he was facing based on the power of the laws of the universe in this area. Species: Demonic Shade. Class: King Class, Late. Maximum Energy Level: 700,943. Species: Demonic Shade. Class: King Class, Late. Maximum Energy Level: 708,125. When he saw the figures, all of this taking place in a split second, he couldn't help but grin. They're stronger than my base strength, but with my powerful balanced demon form and perfect body, I'm at least equal to them. With that thought in mind, Dorian punched back with a blow of his own. He didn't use the power of the law of valor anymore, instead switching over to the law of wrath. It was the law he was most adept with and great for frontal attacks. Hiya! Dorian's balanced demon fist smashed into the green energy that covered the attacker. Thud! The blow sent the elderly demonic shade back a single step, but otherwise left him unharmed. Small cracks appeared on the man's green energy barrier, cracks that instantly healed. The elderly shade frowned when he saw this, beads of sweat appearing on his forehead. Mistress, attack it quickly. Its physical strength is too high for me to easily deal with, all I can do is block it. The shade's voice boomed out. Sigh. Out of the corner of Dorian's eye, he just barely made out the tall female shade shrug, her face emotionless. An instant later, her body blurred and she vanished, moving so quickly she appeared to teleport. Wham! Before Dorian could even finish the thought, a heavy blow slammed into the right side of his face, jerking his body and neck to the side. The blow sent reverberations through his skull, pain swarming over him and then quickly leaving as his balanced demon form recovered. Dorian's mystic armored body had kicked in, blocking a large part of the impact. Despite that, the blow was a truly powerful one and a large portion of it got through the inborn barrier ability. Crack! Dorian cracked his neck casually as he turned to face the woman. Immediately he jumped forward, punching out with his right hand while imbuing it with the law of wrath. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see the elderly shade barreling forward, charging at him. This time, the elderly shade had brought out what looked like a very long sword, swinging it at him. Whoosh! Dorian's punch missed. SHKKK. Before he could think about doing anything else, the elderly shade slammed into him, swinging a long sword at his face. Dorian held his armored arms up to block, causing the blade to stop. Thud thud thud. Unfortunately, as a result of his blocking the sharp edge of the attack with his body, a great deal of force made it past his mystic armored body, forcing him to take several steps backward to avoid falling. Wham! Another blow slammed into Dorian's head as the female shade moved faster than he could react to, yet again rattling his skull. It was at this point, with his eyes bloodshot, that Dorian almost lost it. UMOTHERF. He mentally cut himself off as he clenched his clawed fists. Peace. Balance. His eyes grew cool as he glared at his enemies. Don't just attack blindly like an idiot. What have I been training for this whole time? He took a breath. Hyperion beams. Activate. Whoosh. Not even a full second later. 10 black orbs formed in the air, crackling with power. Dorian smiled nefariously. Mistress, watch out. The elderly shade yelled out loud as he seemed to instinctively sense the danger he was in, kneeling down on the ground and putting his hands in front of him. An amulet on his chest began to glow weakly with light, seemingly enhancing the defensive strength of the green barrier of energy that surrounded him. HMPH. The quick-moving female shade merely sniffed, her body blurring. WHOOSH. An instant later, 10 laser beams blasted forward, shot at precise angles. The beams of energy melted through the air, full of potent power. The stronger Dorian's soul got, the more dangerous his Hyperion beams would become. It was an extremely useful ability, one that he could use to make up for his mediocre skill when it came to close combat. Boom! 5 of the beams shot off towards the crouching elderly shade, slamming into the green barrier that surrounded him. The other 5 all cut through the air towards the blurringly fast female shade. Dorian had aimed one at where the woman had been standing, and 4 more at locations she was liable to move to try to dodge the fast-moving attack. 4 of those lasers missed, but the last one slammed into her as she was fleeing, knocking her backwards in a miniature explosion that shook the air. Sending out 10 Hyperion beams is already enough to help me pin down these experts with ease, though they are only able to use 25% of their strength. If I can keep increasing that number as well as the strength of each individual laser. The thought flashed through his mind as he watched the female shade fly through the air, her body knocking hard against the wall of the room. Meanwhile, 5 of his Hyperion beams had slammed directly into the unmoving old shade, exploding forth with energy. Crackles of power and sparks of light flipped into the air, temporarily obscuring the old shade out of sight. When the obstruction settled, however, Dorian found himself shocked by both the elderly man and the attacking woman. Not so eager now, huh? Dorian's voice was cool as he walked forward, crossing his arms. Internally, however, he could barely control his surprise. That old shade's defensive power, it's extremely high, even with his ability to draw upon the power of law weakened. And that woman, she must be using the law of lust to enhance her speed to a super high degree. My attack almost missed her. How powerful would she be if the restraints on the laws of the universe were removed? His Hyperion beams had badly damaged the old shade's bright green energy barrier, but not broken it. Those cracks slowly healed before his eyes, the barrier returning to normal. The female shade, in the meanwhile, was shrugging off Dorian's attack as she got up, her eyes alert, if a bit pained. Blood could be seen dripping from her face and shoulder. There was a reason the 7 great laws of the demonic race were called the 7 Great. Each law, when mastered and wielded properly, could propel a user to greatness, allowing them to draw upon fantastic powers. Even at 25% power, the mastery these 2 experts had over their laws meant they were considerably strong. Wait, it's speaking to us? The elderly shade froze as he looked at Dorian, stuttering. I spoke from the start, fool. How dare you attack me so randomly? Dorian pulled back his chest as he spoke, his voice booming with the authority he was so used to faking now. No, he is talking, and he's able to use multiple demonic laws. Multiple laws. The elderly shade's voice shook as he came to a certain realization, going over the events of the fast-paced fight. Fervor appearing in his tone as he stared at Dorian and then spun around to address the female shade. Mistress, the fallen prophecies state the chosen redeemer of the demon race shall bear that burden. After so many years, it must be he. The elderly demonic shade zeroed in on Dorian. What is your name? Who are you? Hold on, Radisho. How do we know he is anything but another demonic practitioner? Just Bekau. The woman that the elderly shade called Mistress cut herself off as Dorian held out his hand, deciding to seize the moment. Over the course of a few seconds, Dorian cycled through the law of wrath, the law of greed, the law of lust, the distinctive energy of each rippling in the air. Just because, that really is multiple demonic laws. The female shade seemed to be at a loss, her voice trailing off. Dorian looked back at the duo mysteriously, his eyes calm and collected, as if he hadn't just been in a fierce battle. He took full advantage of whatever misunderstanding they were having, attributing it to his lucky soul status as an anomaly. He began to speak. Who am I? I am the last disciple of the demon emperor. He did look the part, all demon EY. He directly began to make up convincing-sounding lies, his mind racing ahead of him. While you foolishly attacked me, I will not hold it against you should you aid me in the completion of my mission. As he spoke, his voice gained volume. I am here on a mission to resurrect the demon emperor himself. I have returned to the land of my birth, to carry out the will of the ultimate protector of the demonic race. His words echoed in the air as he lied through his teeth. My name. He paused for a brief moment, trying to think up an intimidating name. An instant later, his eyes flashed as inspiration struck. My name is Obelisk, the Tormentor, WHOSH. As he spoke his name, he twisted upon fate, giving himself an awe-inspiring aura. The air around him whipped back and forth as he struck an epic pose, his eyes glowing with untold power and light. He felt a large amount of energy leave his soul as he twisted fate, changing the future itself. This energy and fate change seemed to be directly related to the situation at hand. Specifically, to the two demonic shades he was talking to. The elderly shade seemed to waver for a moment before falling to one knee. Great Demon Disciple. On the top of a random tree that overlooked the Castle of Lust, a small, armored figure could be seen, crouching down. Blue light glimmered around the arms of this figure, hidden behind a set of dark vambraces. The eyes of this figure glowed a cool blue behind a mask as Hallow stared at what was in front of him. They are retreating. Hallow stuttered, his voice incredulous. Right in front of him, a long line of soldiers could be seen filing out of the Castle of Lust. All of them looked cheerful and happy, celebrating as they journeyed away. No demonic remnants attacked them, any nearby ones in the area apparently already cleared out. Indeed, after making so much progress and somehow changing Moria itself. The Moria Liberation Force, as he learned they called themselves, were, for all intents and purposes, giving up. But, they? Hallow's hands fell to his waist as he watched the army retreat, taken completely by surprise. Wait. Hallow smacked his forehead, forcing himself to push back his shock. You're up against an evil genius, Hallow. A cretin of such diabolic intelligence. He would never simply give up here, not after he managed to damage the great Emperor's world. His eyes flashed as he scanned the retreating army. After a long moment, he chuckled darkly. Lord Inigo, I don't see you among those leaving. He smiled grimly as he talked out loud. He must be heading to the other castles. He is why the world changed so much. I don't understand what he's doing, but it's doubtlessly something that will harm us demons. I've finally gotten a step ahead of you, bastard. Hallow's smile widened, his fists clenched. The entire demon council is already lying in wait. Go on and charge towards those hallowed castles, my friend, and be prepared to meet the strongest living demons in existence. His grin hardened. They will stop you or die trying. We would never dream of stopping you, Great Demon Disciple. Please, Great Demon Disciple, do whatever you please. Dorian smiled sharply as he looked at the two powerful demonic shades, his eyes glinting. Good. Be on guard in case that vile hero of the shade race attacks. He is wily and strong, able to disguise himself as anyone. His intelligence and good looks his power cannot be underestimated. Dorian's voice boomed. He will do anything to stop this godly demon. His eyes flashed as he walked up to the sealing tube, the ominous aura that came off it, sealing the power of law from this world and leaving it as a demonic ruin. The demon emperor must be revived. Chapter 188 Break. Dorian raised his hand over the sealing tube, his eyes glowing. He could sense the ominous aura it gave off, a familiar yet dangerous feeling. Slowly, energy began to coalesce as he reached down, his hand mere centimeters above the stone tube. Light and energy began to flash off it as he reached down, grabbing hold of it. The two demonic shades in the room, the mistress of lust who didn't give a name, and the reedy old shade, who had introduced himself as Baron Radisho, the master of gluttony, were both members of the demonic council. When he heard that, his suspicions had been confirmed. The duo in front of him were related to 15, the vicious anomaly that had attacked him and proclaimed he would murder Dorian. When they had first fought, 15 had stated he was a member of the demonic council. While the detail was a rather minor one at the time of the fight, his jade memory kept him from forgetting it. With that thought in mind, he immediately knew he had to keep his true identity a secret. If they learned that he was actually the famous Lord Inigo. Hup! Dorian shook the thoughts from his head as he imbued the sealing tube with energy from his soul spell matrix. Immediately, just like with the other tube, he felt the world around him start to shiver. Energy fluctuated, crackling and exploding in the air. Great demon disciple? Baron Radisho yelled out loud, his voice full of caution. The shade was covered in green energy again, protecting himself despite his alleged faith. It seemed that while he was convinced Dorian was the chosen redeemer of the demon race, it didn't mean he fully trusted his safety to him. Calm yourself and be on guard. The vile Lord Inigo could attack at any moment. Releasing the seal that has locked the Emperor away will take a few moments. It will require my full concentration. These energy fluctuations are arising as a result. Dorian rebuked him, his voice domineering just like a real disciple of the Demon Emperor would be. In his mind, Dorian visualized the world around him. The vision automatically appeared when he began to pull on the sealing tube, mystically present. In this vision, the same mountain-sized chains existed, thousands of them, all bearing down and sealing the world of Moria. The other chains, they are still absent. His eyes flashed as he realized this, ecstatic. The chains that he had broken off with the other sealing tube, they hadn't reformed. According to Fabian, these castles had been wiped out before, largely destroyed by heroes of the past. Yet, somehow, they magically reformed, the world remaining in its desolate, unchanging state. I really can cleanse Moria. Perfect. Not only can I do something good, but I will 100% also be able to cement my public image and ensure Helena's and my safety. Excitement filled his veins as he confidently confirmed the conclusion he had drawn earlier. I just need to safely finish. Meanwhile, at the center of Moria, there existed a grand city set atop a small mountain. A large lake surrounded the northern side of this mountain, transforming into a slow-moving waterfall that dropped off on the southern side of the mountain. Large bulwarks, grand walkways, and towering stone towers dominated the mountain, with small homes and buildings seemingly set about haphazardly. A relatively small castle could be seen at the peak of this small mountain, one and all carved from cool, white stone. This scene contained a certain epic scale, a feeling of historical greatness, as if this had once been a place where the mighty dwelled. This was known as the central castle of Moria to the Shades. Among the demons, it had another name. The city of the Demon Emperor. The capital of the demon race. The birthplace of demonkind, Baartova. The lake that surrounded this mountain split off into a large river, one that wound its way through several grassy plains and small to large hilly mountains, coated in trees. On one hilled area, in particular, a large, white stone tower rose up, rather nondescript apart from its above-average scale. A figure could be seen, standing calmly atop this tower. A human, wearing a gray wool huntsman's vest and pants. His face was lined with age, a small, graying beard borne upon his chin. His eyes were a placid brown, at odds with his constant pacing. In his hands was a long, red bow, held at the ready. How incredible, Leader muttered as he looked out at the city of Baardova. Who would have guessed the entire place is a true dead zone to the laws of the universe? He shook his head. After establishing a temporary alliance with 15, the duo had talked and planned. Leader got the feeling that 15 was rather unstable, but the fact that he was trying to kill Lord Inigo was undeniable. They shared a common enemy. According to 15, the world's changes are caused by that cretin. Leader's eyes flashed coolly as he thought of his target. Energy fluctuated around him from his law of pride. Leader wasn't actually within range of the dead zone at the center of Moria. Instead, he was about 100 meters out from it. The reason he had set up shop here in this tower so far from the city was because of that. And that vile bastard will be warping in here, once he's fully shattered the protections or wards or whatever it is that the Demon Emperor put into place, preventing the power of law from being used fully on Moria. Leader's eyes zeroed in on a spot in particular about 1,500 meters from him. On a large bridge that led across the flowing lake to the base of the small mountain the Demon Emperor's castle was on, a large, circular plaza could be seen. Several hundreds of mysterious inscriptions could be seen, carved into this circle. 15 has done a ton of research about this place, apparently. I hope his knowledge is accurate. Leader pulled back on his faintly glowing bow, aiming it precisely. I won't be missing this time, Lord Inigo. His words rumbled out, a deadly promise. Energy whipped around Dorian as he pulled fiercely on the sealing tube. Once more, he felt and saw the chains that were holding down the world of Moria, restricting and damaging the foul haven, tremble, stretching taut. Snap! Dorian pulled the sealing tube out. The chains broke. The world around Dorian seemed to whiplash back to a completely normal state, the wild and fluctuating energy spreading out in a wave and dissipating. At the same time, Dorian instinctively felt that the world had changed. Once more, he could feel a closer connection to the laws of the universe. Great disciple Obelisk, you succeeded. Baron Radisho didn't quite know what all Dorian was doing, but he could tell that it had been a success. The changes the demon had wrought were quite noticeable. Yes, another of the seals that chains my master has been shattered. Dorian clenched his fists. Only 5 remain. I shall cleanse, cough, the demon emperor shall be revived. Baron Radisho cheered with Dorian, the old man's body shaking with excitement. Even the mistress of lust who had remained silent up to this point seemed to be caught up with emotion, trembling as she heard those words. Both had been fully convinced of his identity. Rip! A glowing portal appeared, floating in mid-air over the throne. The air around this portal vibrated, shaking ever so slightly. Now, before I travel to the next castle, Dorian began, looking around the circular sanctum, as Baron Radisho called it. The inheritance left behind by the demon emperor, I must receive it. It will refresh my understanding of the law of gluttony. Long ago, I was sealed away, just like the demon emperor. I only recently managed to break free and return here. He made up a convincing-sounding excuse, twisting on fate slightly just to be certain, opting to not elaborate further on his made-up backstory. Of course, great demon disciple Obelisk. Right here. The reedy-looking shade immediately waved towards a specific spot in the inner sanctum, pointing down at a place between the throne and the center of the room. The inheritance is open to anyone with a soul that is aspected towards the Great Seven Laws. According to what Dorian had found out, non-demonic beings often had great difficulty accepting or even sensing any of the 7 great demonic laws. Part of accepting the power of the demonic laws would transform a being. It was why the 2 shades in front of him were demonic shades, and not just shades. The laws were extremely powerful, and power like that did not come free. Despite that, it was still easier to sense one of the 7 demonic laws than it was to sense one of the 7 virtuous laws. There was a reason many of the laws Dorian used were practically unheard of in the greater 30,000 worlds. The virtuous laws might not transform the user, but they were much harder to acquire as a result. He shook the thoughts from his mind as he looked at what Baron Radisho was pointing at. On the ground, a complex and miniature array could be seen, carved into the floor. This array was shaped like a circle and covered in mysterious symbols. It glowed faintly with magical energy. Dorian walked up to it, feeling a strange allure. He could almost sense the array itself, feeling his soul seem to resonate. This was, indeed, the inheritance. Without hesitation, Dorian sat directly next to it. He then reached out with his hand, placing it atop the array. He felt an odd, unsettling feeling sweep over his body, faint sparks of energy appearing in his vision. Dorian blinked. Whoosh! Instantly, when he opened his eyes, he found himself in a completely different place. The transition was jarringly abrupt, causing him to gasp out loud as he looked around in confusion. He was standing in what looked like a public park, back on Earth in America. He could see several large picnic tables and a long table off to his left, and further down a playground full of swings and slides. To his right, the park eventually ended and a large road began, leading to several different neighborhoods. I recognize this, he muttered out loud, rubbing his chin. This was the park across the street from his neighborhood. Champions Park. A cool breeze blew across the empty park, rustling the grass. Dorian took a deep breath as he felt it, nostalgia filling him. It's just like in my memories. He smiled, bittersweet. Well, only without any people. The park had always been semi-crowded, from what he remembered. Abruptly, a mostly transparent bubble appeared, just a couple of meters in front of Dorian. "Ah, Master Bubble," Dorian exclaimed, his eyes narrowing. As he reached for the various energies linked to his soul, he realized that, once more, he couldn't access any of them. Just like the other one, I must truly be inside another law inheritance from the Demon Emperor. He was picking up laws like they were candy. If either of the two members of the demonic council had been aware of his exploits, or that they were actively helping Lord Inigo get stronger, the duo might have died from anger directly. After all, picking up even a single law was an exceptionally difficult task, let alone picking up more than one. Even for the wise jade dragons of the wise jade dragon tribe, with their inborn jade memory, it was a difficult trial. Most laws wouldn't resonate with each other. This would make sensing other laws far more difficult. You again. The bubble seemed shaken as it floated in front of Dorian, flying back and forth in the air forcefully. Well, as forcefully as a bubble could look. Oh, you're the same array genie? Dorian gave the bubble a winning smile. The array genie was indeed the same one, magically linked to all of the inheritances. I take it this is another inheritance, yes? Well, this godly demon is humbly willing to accept it. He gave a slight bow. The bubble merely glared at him. As much as a bubble could glare, anyway. Which wasn't really much at all. Life as a bubble must be hard. Dorian shook the stray thoughts from his head, focusing on the present. Very well, but only because His Great Highness set the inheritances up in a way that I cannot reject you. The bubble seemed to sigh in defeat, despite its lack of a visible throat. This is the inheritance of gluttony. It draws upon your past memories, melding them together to create a challenge unique to yourself. The bubble's voice echoed, "Ready yourself, for it will start immediately." Whoosh! Without giving Dorian actual time to prepare, the bubble vanished. A moment later, the world transformed. Instantly, the empty picnic tables were replaced, with tables teeming with, of all things, hundreds of delicious-smelling hot dogs. The long table off to his left suddenly was covered with a large tablecloth, with several figures appearing sitting on one side, all holding up signs with numbers on them. A large number of figures appeared as well, all sitting at the picnic tables, or standing near them. When Dorian saw who was sitting down, his jaw fell open in shock. A man with long brown hair and a mustache, dressed in a brown vest and a white shirt. The actual Inigo Montoya? A man with short brown hair, dressed in a brown cloth shirt and pants, and a set of brown boots. The Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi? A man wearing a full set of black armor, covered with a black mask that echoed over and over with a mechanical breathing noise. The Sith Lord Darth Vader? A gargantuan, towering greenish-blue-colored demonic beast, somehow sitting down on the opposite side of several of the tables, taking up more than a dozen meters of room. The actual god monster, Obelisk the Tormentor? A man with mid-length dark blonde hair wearing glasses and a suit. Is that John Denver, the singer of Take Me Home, Country Roads? A bald, muscular and very tall man with a mechanical mask covering his mouth. Is that Bane from the DC Comics universe? A tall, muscular purple-skinned man wearing a metal gauntlet on one of his hands. Is that Thanos from the Marvel universe? Dorian's eyes widened as he realized what had happened. This array had drawn upon his memories to create the challenge he would face. It seemed to have drawn upon his memories of Earth. However, it must have drawn upon some of his more recent memories. And of those memories he had, some were of him impersonating several figures from movies, or borrowing famous quotes to intimidate, or other random things. The array didn't differentiate from real people and fake characters. He stared, his entire body physically shocked. Before he could do or say anything, however, a loud voice echoed across the park. On your marks, gentlemen. The official champion's hot dog eating contest will begin in 30 seconds. The speaker was one of the 5 judges sitting at the long panel. Thankfully, all 5 of these appeared to be regular humans, albeit ones he didn't recognize. Only his competitors appeared to be drawn from his recent memories, perhaps in an attempt to seem more familiar. I have to out-eat all of them in a hot dog eating contest to complete the inheritance of gluttony? He stuttered in disbelief. 20 seconds. Dorian threw up his hands in the air at the sheer ridiculousness of the scenario and sprinted towards one of the open tables, his eyes flashing with determination. It was hot dog eating time. Chapter 189 Inheritance. Each table was wooden, filled with several platters that had mountains of hot dogs on them. Long wooden benches could be seen on either side, taking up space. 15 seconds. As the judges counted down, Dorian glanced at the contestant sitting next to him. It was the real Inigo Montoya. Hello, I'm Dorian, he stuttered out, staring at the man. He had never expected to meet the character in real life and had no idea what to say. The man glanced at him. "My name is Inigo Montoya." The man's voice was smooth and confident, carrying a rich Spanish accent that made his words unmistakable. After he spoke, he turned to look at the hot dogs, his eyes blazing with passion. "I have no idea how I came to be here, but hot dogs, I know you are my enemy. I will defeat you." Inigo's body language made his words seem grand, prepared to die. 10 seconds. As the judges continued to count down, Dorian noticed something. The closer the judges got to 0, the more and more aware he felt. His eyes widened as he realized something. "My soul, my powers, I can feel them returning." It seemed that, for this challenge, he would be able to use his full strength once it started. He was only cut off from his powers before it began. Still, even if I can shift forms or use my abilities, how am I supposed to win against that? He turned to stare at the gargantuan obelisk, the tormentor. The god monster was huge, far bigger than anything else in sight, easily 40 meters tall sitting down. 5 seconds. "Anakin, you were a brother to me. Don't make me defeat you once more." His ears almost stretched out as he heard the Jedi Obi-Wan rebuke the Sith Darth Vader. Both were sitting at a table off to his right. Off to his left, he heard still more familiar speakers. "I was born in the darkness, bred in it. There can be no balance in the shadows." Bane's mechanical voice rang out. "There cannot be shadow without light. Everything in life has balance." Thanos replied, closing his hand on the partially complete infinity gauntlet he wielded. Dorian's eyes widened as he saw that. "Oh man, they really are all here." The various characters have referenced. "Think, Dorian, how do I win this? I need to complete the challenge to get the inheritance." Unlike the Lust inheritance, the design of this Gluttony inheritance seemed centered around this competition. He had to actively win to receive it. 3, 2, 1, begin? Immediately, Dorian reached forward, grabbing a hot dog. Right after he did that, however, absolute mayhem unfolded. Boom! Dorian was blasted backwards, his entire table incinerated in an explosion. Poor Inigo Montoya was just a regular human and died instantly, his last move proudly stabbing one of the hot dogs with his rapier before perishing. Bits of wood and rock shot into the air, clouds of dust fizzling off. "Huh?" Dorian grunted out as he spun around and landed, cradling a hot dog in his hands. He looked out at the scene before him in sheer shock. The moment the judges said go, all of the villains sitting at the table had taken the opportunity to attack. What better way to win a contest than to ensure that you were the only competitor? However, each character stayed true to their motivations, pulled from whatever movie they had been in. Darth Vader launched Obi-Wan away, using the mystical force that apparently worked here, jumping after him with a lightsaber. "The Jedi are the ones in the wrong, Obi-Wan. I did what I had to because I could see that, Anakin. If that is what you truly believe, then you are lost." BWSSSHH. The duo broke out in a lightsaber duel, jumping among the treetops of Champions Park, completely ignoring the hot dog competition. Thanos, on the other hand, had ignored all the other competitors and vanished, using his infinity gauntlet to teleport himself into the air, floating directly in front of the giant obelisk, the Tormentor. "Your presence here has thrown this competition out of balance. How could any singular being compete against a being of such proportion like yourself?" Thanos shook his head, his voice deep and methodical. Obelisk had picked up an entire table and was reaching to eat the whole thing when this occurred. The god beast turned its piercing red eyes to look at Thanos. It looked at him as if he was merely an insect in its way, unworthy of attention. Boom! Its massive arm whipped upward at light speed as it dropped the table and attacked. Thanos, in the meanwhile, tapped into the powers of the Infinity Gauntlet, causing space to freeze up around him. When Obelisk's massive arm slammed into the frozen space, a huge shockwave spread out as greenish-blue energy exploded outward, blowing apart hundreds of trees and annihilating the nearby park area. Strangely enough, the judges sitting at the long table appeared fine, some type of invisible protective barrier protecting them. What in the heavens? Who are these beings? How can they be so powerful? As Dorian witnessed all this, a familiar angry voice sounded off in his head. "Oh, Master Bubble," Dorian muttered out as he swallowed the lone hot dog he'd managed to snag in a single gulp, looking around. "Are you watching T-Boom?" Before he could finish speaking, An explosion sent Dorian's balanced demon form flying backward a few meters, the unexpected blast taking him by surprise. Dirt was sent flying in the air as a crater formed, the already damaged ground damaged even further. Thankfully, with all his abilities active and his balanced demon form out, he was completely unscathed. "Oh, you survived that well, strange creature." Bane's mechanical voice tumbled in the air as he emerged from the cloud of dust, carrying what appeared to be several explosives with him. Ah, the explosion was from him. Dorian turned to look at the still corpse of the real Inigo Montoya, his eyes flashing. He also couldn't see the other regular human, John Denver, and assumed he was dead as well, killed by the blast. Or maybe he just left. Denver was known to be against violence and an environmental activist. Dorian couldn't really see him competing in a hot dog eating contest where food would be wasted. "You killed him before I could even talk to him." His voice was full of danger as he stared at Bane. His thoughts turned to Inigo. He knew the character wasn't real, nor was the now dead Inigo. They were all made-up illusions from the inheritance. Yet, the scene before him felt undeniably real. The magic that powered it advanced far beyond his expectations. Whoosh! Dorian's body blurred. In a split second, he landed down on the ground next to Bane, his movements incredibly quick. For, in that moment, Dorian had drawn upon both the law of lust and the law of chastity, simultaneously, for the first time. When he did so, he felt the world around him seem to shift. Similar to how it functioned in his perfect body state, everything slowed down. This increase was hugely noticeable. The world around him slowed down by at least 50%. The law of chastity and the law of lust had almost identical effects. By using them both at once, Dorian was able to increase their overall effectiveness. Each law slowed the world down around him by roughly 25%, with his current understanding. When he used them both at once, these two laws seemed to work together and slowed reality to roughly half its normal speed. Wow, his only thought was one of awe. Everything around him was moving at half speed. Of all the 7 great laws of the demonic race that he had acquired, this law was the one that most impressed him. His understanding of it was still only middling, yet if he fully mastered it, he instinctively felt that he could slow the world around him by more than 25%. Perhaps by 30%, or 40%, or even more. He was unsure what the upper limit would be, especially when combined. Even further, the fact that the law of chastity of the 7 virtuous laws had a similar effect and could even be combined was huge news to Dorian. The increase was far more noticeable in his balanced demon form, his best humanoid close combat form. As he landed down next to Bane, he lashed out with his claws in an almost lazily fast strike. His hand slammed into the huge, muscular character from his memories, and instantly killed him, ripping his heart and chest apart in one single motion, sending red blood spattering everywhere. Oh, right, he was just an above-average human in the movies. The Bane that Dorian was familiar with wasn't that strong of a character when compared to beings like him. Boom! Dorian felt an explosion shake the air as Obelisk the Tormentor and Thanos began to battle. Explosions of light and sound seared out as reality itself trembled. The two beings were colossally powerful in their own right, Thanos with his Infinity Gauntlet and Obelisk with, well, himself. Great beast, I admire your strength, but I cannot allow you to upset the delicate balance of this contest. Thanos' deep voice echoed out as he and the huge blue demon separated temporarily. Obelisk was standing upright with blue energy crackling around his arms, his eyes flashing, while Thanos had his hand stretched out upward. Gworn, a laser beam of blue energy shot forward and slammed into Thanos. This beam twisted at the last moment as it was about to hit him, the powerful attack absorbed into his Infinity Gauntlet. Thanos then shot the attack back at the towering god beast, knocking it several dozen meters through the air. When the creature landed, it formed a crater of cracked earth and fallen trees, sending up a shower of wood and stone shrapnel. So be it, beast. Thanos called out loud, Hup. Thanos made a large, jerking motion, as if he was pulling something hard. The extremely powerful Infinity Gauntlet on his hand flashed, light sparking off of it. A moment later, Dorian's eyes widened in awe. For, in the sky far above, he could now make something out. A huge object, hurtling towards them. Thanos had pulled Earth's moon out of orbit and brought it blasting down towards where they were. Are you an idiot? You brought down the entire moon to deal with a single being here? This will wipe out THO right, this is all a fake Earth. Dorian caught himself mid-yell as he watched the unfolding scene of apocalypse before him. Strike me down, Anakin, and I will only return stronger than before, Hua. Over to the side, Dorian witnessed a somewhat familiar scene. Obi-Wan being killed by Darth Vader, the duel they had apparently ending. How would Darth Vader even eat a hot dog? He doesn't look like he wants to take that mask off. The character wore a large black mask that obscured his face. Roar! Obelisk the Tormentor let out a rage-filled roar as it saw the moon descending upon them. Even Dorian was shaken, despite knowing this was all fake, as he watched the gargantuan rock plunge towards them. Large clumps of the moon seemed to fall apart, shooting down ahead of its main body in waves of flaming meteors. It was horrifying to see. The moon blocked out the sun in the sky, a huge piece of white and gray rock that stretched more than 2,000 miles wide. The meteors that fell from it cascaded through the air, a true ending of the world. Dorian felt the air tremble around them as the moon penetrated the atmosphere, huge vibrations of heat and pressure shaking reality. My God, what do I do? Dorian stared up at the massive rock, his heart dropping. How on earth was he supposed to do literally anything about that? There are no longer any hot dogs remaining. Thus, the champion's hot dog eating contest is complete. The judges are now tallying the numbers. As he was facing his death, trying to think up a plan, a loud voice cut through the mess of the world around him. Dorian spun to the left, staring. The panel of human judges were all currently sitting down casually, talking amongst themselves, ignoring the literal millions of tons of rock that were hurtling towards Earth, about to cause its complete destruction. The results are now tallied. The judges called out confidently, apparently unaffected by the quaking waves of heat and pressure as the atmosphere of Earth began to dissipate. Gworn Obelisk shot another towering laser beam at Thanos, one that Thanos promptly reabsorbed and shot back as the two began to duke it out. Darth Vader, meanwhile, silently looked at where the corpse of Obi-Wan had been. Upon his death, the body had vanished, disappearing. The winner, with a grand total of 1 hot dog eaten, is the demon challenger Dorian. Dorian blinked. That's right. Almost all of the tables and hot dogs were wiped out by the explosions from Bane and Obelisk. The heat and pressure waves from the descending moon must have wiped out any remnants. He slowly came to the realization as more explosions shook the air between the dueling foes. I managed to snag a single hot dog and ate it quickly. Many of the characters that showed up from my memories were villains, all from movies or TV shows. As such, they all attacked each other without eating, causing the contest to be thrown into disarray. As he realized that he had won the contest, Dorian felt a feeling of epiphany settle upon his shoulders. He felt energy swarm his soul, a familiar feeling descending upon him. Green, vibrating energy surrounded his body, wrapping around his soul like a warm blanket. It was relaxing and energizing, filling him with satisfaction. He was undergoing another baptism of the laws of the universe directly. This time, for the law of gluttony. As the world around him fell apart and Dorian was about to vanish, teleporting away after completing the inheritance, he heard a voice call out in his head, "What is going on? What are these creatures? How are they doing what they are doing?" The frantic voice of the Array Genie continued, "What kind of past did you have? What is going on?" Whoosh! Dorian vanished, leaving behind a collapsing world and a greatly panicked bubble. Chapter 190 New Developments. Whoosh! Dorian blinked, his body tingling. He took a single deep breath as he cleared his vision. He had returned to the inner sanctum of the Castle of Gluttony. As soon as he returned, he called up Asra and had her display his law's progress, sorting the mental display to be read a little easier. Law's progress. Virtuous laws. Law of valor, 25%. Law of charity, 5%. Law of mercy, 20%. Law of chastity, 1%. Demonic laws. Law of greed, 22%. Law of wrath, 40%. Law of lust, 1%. Law of gluttony, 1%. I've gained 4 of each now. I didn't manage to get the opposite of the law of gluttony, though. He frowned, ever so slightly. When he had achieved the law of lust, he had also snagged the law of chastity. It seemed he wasn't lucky enough to engender a repeat of that scenario when he grabbed the law of gluttony. Still, The more laws I get, the better. Hey, he couldn't help but grin. Great demon disciple obelisk? The reedy voice of Baron Radisho caught Dorian's attention, turning his thoughts away as he looked up. Baron Radisho. Ah, the refreshing of my memories was a success. Slowly, Dorian held his hand out to the side. Immediately, bright green energy began to swarm, a very faint protective layer appearing, like a smaller version of the powers Baron Radisho had shown. The sealing tube has been withdrawn here. I can feel the presence of the laws again, much more strongly, just like at the Castle of Lust. He noted as he felt the energy from the law of gluttony cover his clawed hand. Each demonic law had something unique about it. The law of wrath was for attack power. The law of lust modified one's physical perception of time. The law of greed strengthened the soul. The law of gluttony, as Dorian learned, was all about defensive power. It allowed one to cover themselves in a protective barrier that vastly enhanced their defensive prowess. It was because of this that Dorian had barely been able to scratch Baron Radisho even with multiple Hyperion beam attacks. It was a law entirely focused on defense. If I continue to master this, I will slowly become a turtle. He smiled ruefully. The green light would cover him in a protective shell that, from a distance, would vaguely bear some resemblance to a large turtle. He took a brief glance around the inner sanctum of the Castle of Gluttony. If he went exploring, he likely would find similar troves of treasure as he had in the Castle of Lust. Those treasures must be put there for a reason, though, likely to reward those seeking the demonic inheritances here, or at least, to keep people interested in coming to Moria. He thought, his eyes narrowed. Congratulations, great demon disciple. If you truly can bring back the demon emperor, our loyalty will be undying. A warm, passionate and sultry voice broke his thoughts as the mistress of lust spoke aloud, her eyes gleaming. It seemed his actions had fully convinced her as well. Now both the master of gluttony and the mistress of lust were on his side. How many of them are there on the demonic council? I'll need to maintain my cover or else. He realized as he glanced at them. Even with the laws weakened, they were very powerful foes. Ah, mistress of lust? Do you have a name I could call you by? He turned his attention directed towards the attractive older shade, smiling genteelly. Well. She stuttered for a moment, her mouth twitching as she glanced at Baron Radisho for some reason, before she replied. Priscilla. Oh ho, you finally reveal your true name, mistress of lust. Not Danielle, Baron Radisho almost immediately chortled, his reedy figure shaking from both the excitement of the moment and enjoyment at the expense of the mistress of lust. Of those on the demonic council, she had always been very secretive, never revealing her name, only going by a fake one. She turned and glared at him, her beautiful features nevertheless making even that look attractive. Well, my fellow demonic practitioners. Dorian stood up, his balanced demon form stretching as he looked over at the two demonic shades. Let us continue our journey. Guard my back as I unseal all the seals, and free the demon emperor. He motioned at the rippling portal that had appeared over the throne at the back of the room. Yes sir, great demon disciple. As you command, great demon disciple. As Dorian began to walk towards it, he thought about the other aspect to these castles. The demonic remnants that guarded them. After I unseal Moria and allow the world to return to normal, those demonic remnants will likely all perish. The fact that they constantly reappeared over time had clued Dorian into the fact that they likely were related to the sealing tubes. I'm guessing that the energy that is sealed away is used to power and resurrect them, or something of that nature. The inheritances won't be damaged by my actions, but the demonic remnants likely will. The demonic remnants all existed in a desiccated state. Without magical energy to power them, they would eventually die. That's probably why the remnants that come out from Moria don't cause too much damage. They likely are greatly weakened and die off before they can do much harm. The thought flashed into his mind. He'd heard that the nearby area was plagued by waves of demonic remnants on occasion, but if those remnants had been nearly as strong as the ones they faced, regular citizens would be wiped out in the tens of thousands. It was like the undead giants and Greycons on Blizzaria. They were very rarely seen outside of that planet, and for good reason. They would eventually perish if they left it, only kept alive through the mysterious magic that operated there. By this point, Dorian reached the glowing portal. He paused in front of the throne, turning to look back at the two demonic shades. He gave them each a small nod. The demonic shades were currently withdrawing what looked like some type of brown-plated armor, covered in archaic markings. Some type of artifact that seemed to be defensively focused. When they saw Dorian nod and step right up next to the portal, they stared at him with confusion. Great Demon Disciple, if you step into the transport portals without protection, severe harm or even dia. Baron Radisho began but cut himself off as the demonic shade's jaw dropped. Onward. Without waiting to hear the rest of what the shade said, Dorian boldly walked directly into the portal, activating his perfect body ability as he did so. Whoosh! Dorian vanished. By chaos itself, he just went in. Baron Radisho stuttered as he saw this, almost falling over from shock. A leg piece of the brown armor he was strapping to himself slipped from his hands, clattering on the stone floor. Space itself will rend you apart if you are unlucky in there. Priscilla mumbled, her eyes wide. Yet, he just went in, as if it was nothing. The two demonic shades stood awestruck for a moment before they began to frantically gear up, rushing in after Dorian. Incredible, what a true great demon disciple. Moments after Dorian stepped into the portal, he felt an odd, twisting sensation. The world around him seemed to stretch, distorting. Energy began to swarm around him chaotically. Just like last time, he thought, his eyes flashing. He was randomly buffeted, chaotic energy clashing against his physical form. With his perfect body and mystic armored body abilities active, the energy couldn't harm him. Just as he was thinking that, a burning sensation spread through his body. Huh? Dorian's eyes widened as he realized what had happened. A huge gash had appeared on his back, blood vaporizing from the wound as it came into contact with the flashing energy all around him. Without him noticing at all, almost instantaneously, he had become injured. How? As he went on full alert, his body automatically began to repair itself, his constant regeneration going strong. His energy levels were close to full, especially after the baptism for the law of gluttony, though he didn't have time to check specifics right now. I think, space ruptured? With his jade memory, he couldn't forget even the slightest detail, no matter how minor. As he cast his mind back, he could recall extremely minute spatial fluctuations, right before the pain in his back. Still, the blow was greatly weakened and didn't kill me. As he realized this, he relaxed slightly. Most of the impacts here couldn't harm him, and he was confident that even the ones that could harm him would have a great deal of difficulty when it came to killing him. Let's try using the law of gluttony. He realized, blinking. This is a perfect opportunity. Whoosh! Just as he was thinking that too, he arrived at his destination, cast out from the portal into a large, mostly empty room. Damn it, he groaned as he got up, feeling the wound on his back. It was still healing, fighting off remnant energy particles as it was restored. I should have used the law of gluttony at the beginning. I got lucky the first time around by not encountering any dangerous impacts. Teleporting is scary stuff. He rebuked himself, making a promise to go into the next one fully prepared. He stood up from the ground, wincing slightly as his back twinged. He then looked around, studying his surroundings. He was standing in a large, enclosed arena. The walls were covered with long scratches from weapons or beasts, marring the otherwise smooth gray stone. The ground was cracked and stained dark red, giving the room a rather ominous appearance. At the center of the room was a large, crimson blade, stabbed into the ground. Several cracks in the floor appeared to have originated from the sword, making it seem like it had been stabbed down with a tremendous amount of force, long ago. Not far from the blade was one of the ceiling tubes, set behind it. No throne in here? He muttered, looking around. All the other castles had had thrones in them, while this one didn't. He shrugged and walked over towards the sword. He stopped before he reached it, however, his powerful eyes catching sight of a somewhat familiar sight. A circle carved into the ground, where dozens of mystic symbols could be seen. Faint particles of red light drifted off this particular circle, floating in the air. The Wrath Inheritance? He could sense a faint resonance with the mystic symbols carved into the ground, one he felt in his soul. He knelt down slowly, resting his hand upon the symbols. He blinked. Whoosh! He vanished, reappearing on the bulwark of a castle. The noon sun beat down overhead, while a stifled breeze swept past, carrying with it the stench of blood. Dorian's powers were once again sealed away, leaving him as a regular mortal. Well, a regular balanced demon, which was quite a step up from a regular mortal. In the background, he could make out a great wall of mountains, spiked and pointing up towards the sky. A large castle was visible behind him, aged gray stone stained by the winds of time. In front of him, he could make out a large, mostly empty plain. At the edge of his vision, he could see several thousands of red tents set up, but no one actually appeared to be occupying them. In fact, he couldn't see another living figure anywhere at all. Welcome to the inheritance of wrath where wait, no, not you, Master Bubble. Dorian let out a laugh as he saw the translucent bubble appear in his vision, floating just a meter away. Light refracted oddly when it went through the bubble, making the mountains behind it seem inverted. It's good to see you again. Sorry for leaving so abruptly last time. He began, giving the bubble his best smile. What kind of freakish past do you have? Who were those beings? I've never heard of anything like it. The bubble angrily responded, its voice full of rebuke. They almost destroyed the memory array that Master set up to contain the gluttony inheritance. I don't even know how that is possible. They shouldn't be able to do anything outside of your memories of them. He muttered, scratching his head. His memories of movies and TV shows had been picked up by whatever magic array controlled the gluttony inheritance and translated as real. Apparently, this had strained the array so much that it nearly collapsed the entire thing. Well, I've had an interesting past. Those were all things I witnessed firsthand. He wasn't technically lying, after all. He did see all of those beings, right on the TV. So what about this inheritance? Does it draw on my memories too? He smiled cheerfully. Yes, the bubble's voice was strained and begrudging. Haha, excellent. Then I can try to see if it will further my understanding of the law of wrath. Dorian smiled wider, feeling pleased. Ah, you already have an understanding of the law of wrath. The bubble shook for a moment. Right, you do. I can sense it. Abruptly, its voice took on a bright, cheerful edge. That means I can eject you. The world around Dorian began to grow slightly fuzzy, all of a sudden, as he felt his connection to this inheritance fizzle slightly. Wait, you can't kick me out. That's discrimination. Dorian yelled out loud, incredulous. He had just gotten here. Ha ha ha, the process is automatic. There is nothing I can do to stop it. You would be kicked out even without me. The bubble's voice was filled with glee. Out with you, foul demon. We're all demonic practitioners here, that isn't even an insult. Dorian shot back. Send him away, hooray. The bubble ignored him, yelling happily. Whoosh. The world around Dorian vanished as he returned to where he'd been just moments ago, his consciousness focused back on his physical form. He blinked as he came to, mentally cursing the array genie. Damn you, Master Bubble. Just you wait till I get a needle near you. I bet I'll see you at the other inheritances. He mentally grumbled, plotting his revenge as he smiled. Then again, these inheritances only seem geared towards giving you a basic level of understanding of a single law. The law of wrath is one of the laws I understand most. The wrath inheritance would have likely done nothing for me. He shrugged and then turned his attention to the sealing tube, located just behind the center of the room. Let's handle that seal first. He nodded sharply. Meanwhile, back in the city of Cractal. Greetings, citizens of Cractal. I am the third Shadow Captain, Kanto Ren, under the Southern Duke of Shadow. A voice echoed out as a shade wearing a long green robe, with finely manicured fingers and a rather weak-looking face, yelled aloud. He had a weak chin, a small nose, and eyes that looked downcast, yet his voice was powerful, thronging with a king-class aura. I bring a message from the Southern Duke of Shadow himself. Lord Inigo Montoya has betrayed the Shade Race. The Southern Duke has obtained intelligence that states that his wife is none other than a filthy, evil, conniving vampire.